I woke up to my sister-in-law calling my name, and I couldn't believe my eyes. She was standing right there, the same woman I'd buried over 40 years ago. I was back in my brother's tiny house in Shuangma Ridge, northeast China. The last thing I remembered was visiting their graves, crying my heart out, and then collapsing from a brain hemorrhage. But somehow I'd come back. It was 1980 again. My brother Deming was lying on the heated bed, skinny as a skeleton, barely able to talk. He called me in to say his piece, that my job was gone, we had no money, and my girlfriend's father would never let her marry me now. He told me he was dying and asked me to take care of my sister-in-law Yanfang and the kids after he was gone. I knew exactly what day this was. This was the day my brother killed himself. See, after our parents died when I was 10, my brother took me in and raised me. But I'd been a lousy kid, running around with troublemakers, drinking, gambling, never helping at home. My brother borrowed 30 yuan and got me a construction job in the county, but I got fired after 3 months. Meanwhile, he'd become paralyzed. My sister-in-law sold our pig just to pay back the debt. That night, my brother decided he was a burden and ended his life. The next spring, my sister-in-law worked herself to death too. But not this time. I grabbed his hand and told him straight. If he dared to die, I'd leave and never look after his family. That shut him up. His little boy Xiqing poked his head through the door and said he was hungry. Yanfang broke a rough flour cake into 4 pieces for the 2 kids. When the boy asked for meat, she scolded him. My heart ached. I asked my brother about the pig we'd raised. He told me Yanfang sold most of it to pay the debt, and wolves got the rest. He wouldn't even spend money on medicine for himself. I made up my mind. I told my sister-in-law to keep the fire going for my brother and that I was going out to get meat. She tried to stop me. It was freezing cold, but I grabbed a net and a big chopping knife and headed for the mountain. I knew that mountain like the back of my hand. In my past life, after my brother's family was gone, I'd worked as a forest ranger up there for years. I learned to hunt. I learned which herbs were valuable, and I learned how to survive. The northeast wilderness was rich: deer, wild boar, fish, you name it. This time around, I was going to feed this family. I'd get them meat every day, sell animal furs and herbs for money, and cure my brother's illness. His paralysis came from malnutrition and overwork. I'd learned that from doctors in my previous life. With proper food and rest, he could recover. My brother and sister-in-law spent their whole lives taking care of me. Now it was my turn to take care of them. I was just heading out when someone knocked on the door. It was Zhao Shuang, a guy from the next street over, one of my old drinking buddies. They used to call him the fool. He'd sweet-talk me, call me big brother, and borrow money he never paid back. I remembered now, in my past life, he came to borrow money this exact night, and I gave it to him like an idiot, leaving my sister-in-law to beg neighbors for food in the freezing cold. Not this time. Zhao Shuang showed up acting all buddy-buddy, trying to throw his arm around me. I shoved him off. He wanted to borrow 10 yuan, said his mom found him a girl and he needed to buy stuff. I told him it was none of my business. When he tried to reach into my pocket, I slapped his hand away and nearly kicked him into the ditch. He yelled after me, threatening to tell Chun Yuan that I'd been fired from the construction job. I didn't care. In my past life, he'd done exactly that, blabbed it while drinking with friends, and Yuan dumped me the next day. I fell apart after that, and my sister-in-law ended up working herself to death taking care of all of us. This time, I actually wanted to be done with Yuan sooner rather than later. I headed west toward the edge of the village, carrying my net and chopping knife. It was 20 or 30 below zero, but my young body felt strong and warm. I couldn't believe how good it felt. In my old life, right before I died, I could barely move. As I walked, I kept my eyes on the firewood piles along the road. See, after the mountain gets sealed off by heavy snow, wild pheasants come down looking for food and hide inside those wood piles for the whole winter. I knew how to catch them. I'd learned to mimic their calls during my years as a forest ranger. I spotted fresh tracks near a woodpile on the west end. I crouched down and started whistling, making pheasant sounds. Sure enough, one poked its little head out. The second it spread its wings to fly, I swung the net and caught it midair. One quick cut with the knife, and it was done. I was heading home with the bird when Zhao Shuang caught up, freezing and shivering. He saw my pheasant and started drooling, demanding half of it. When I refused, he threatened me again, said he'd tell Yuan about me getting fired. I played along and told him to go ahead, the sooner the better. He was completely confused. I warned him to hurry before it got dark. Wolves were out. He cursed me out and stomped off toward Yuan's house, swearing he'd break us up. Right on cue, a wolf howled somewhere nearby. I heard him slip and fall, then scramble away in a panic. I couldn't help but laugh. On my way back, I spotted a wild rabbit bouncing through the snow. That got me thinking. Rabbit meat is good eating, and the fur can be sold or made into gloves for the kids. My sister-in-law was handy with sewing, as good as any tailor in town. Back at the house, the water was already boiled. My niece Ying and nephew Xiqing had been glued to the window waiting for me. My sister-in-law figured I'd gone off drinking with Zhao Shuang and told the kids to stop hoping for meat and just eat their bread. Then I walked through the door. The kids came running out to meet me when they heard the door. My sister-in-law was staring through the window, confused. She'd expected me to be out drinking with Zhao Shuang until the middle of the night like I always used to. I handed the pheasant to Ying and told the kids to get back inside where it was warm. I put away my net, wiped the blood off the knife so it wouldn't rust, and went in. The bird was a good 3 pounds. I poured hot water into a basin and started plucking the feathers. I told the kids to pick out the nice ones so I could make them shuttlecocks later. You stick feathers into a copper coin and wrap it with cloth. The kids got excited right away. When I cleaned the bird, I kept the liver, heart, and gizzard but threw out the intestines. Xiqing asked why we couldn't eat them, and I told him they had worms. Truth is, they're probably fine if you wash them, but I'd seen news reports about parasites decades from now and didn't want to risk it. I cut up the chicken and let my sister-in-law take over the cooking. Her food always tasted better than mine. She suggested stewing it so we could have hot soup on such a cold night. Sounded perfect. While the chicken cooked, I sat down and made 2 shuttlecocks for the kids. My hands were rusty. It had been over 40 years, and by the time I finished, the food was ready. My sister-in-law fed my brother first, tearing up the meat and spooning broth into his mouth. After a whole bowl of chicken soup, his pale face actually got some color back, and his voice grew stronger. She wiped away tears when she saw that. First sign of improvement since he'd been paralyzed. There wasn't much meat on a 3-pound bird once you take out the guts and bones. My brother ate 2 pieces of breast. My sister-in-law only ate the head and the tail end. I chewed on a neck bone and drank some broth, and gave everything else to the kids. They devoured it, and then licked their fingers clean when it was gone. That hit me hard. In my past life, every time I got paid at the construction job, I'd buy meat skewers for myself, lend money to Zhao Shuang for drinking, or buy gifts for Yuan. I never once thought about these 2 kids. They'd helped around the house, brought me food, and I never gave them a thing back. I was garbage. After dinner, I pulled out 22 yuan, my last paycheck, and gave 20 to my sister-in-law. I kept just 2 for myself. She tried to refuse, but I told her we needed money for coal since the firewood wouldn't last with me back home, and the kids needed school money too. I stuffed the bills into her pocket. My brother smiled and told her to take it. She was so moved she cried. She'd been holding this family together all by herself for months, and now suddenly I was acting like a real man for the first time in my life. I could tell she didn't trust it would last, but even a few days of relief meant something to her. After everyone went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the kids licking their fingers. So I got up, went to the shed, dug out some rusty old wire, and bent it into snare traps for rabbits. Then I slipped out the front gate to set them up. My brother heard the door and asked about it. My sister-in-law checked and saw I'd left. She figured I'd gone out drinking after all, that my good behavior had only lasted 1 meal. She told my brother she'd stay up and wait for me, worried about the wolves that had been spotted around the village lately. My sister-in-law and brother stayed up waiting for me without me knowing. When I got back from setting the snares, she came out and told me wolves had been spotted near the village, just to warn me to be careful. She didn't ask where I'd been or what I'd been doing. She'd learned years ago that nagging me only made things worse. In my old life, every time they'd say something about my drinking, I'd promise to stop, then go borrow money the next day and do it all over again. Eventually they stopped asking, but they still waited up every night to make sure I got home safe. My brother especially. After our parents died, I was all the family he had. He'd work all day, then stay up half the night waiting for me, then drag himself out to work again the next morning. His body breaking down like this, that was partly my fault. I locked the door, went back to my room, and slapped myself hard across the face. If I hadn't been such a mess, my brother wouldn't be this sick, my sister-in-law wouldn't have worked herself to death, and the kids wouldn't have ended up orphans. I owed this family everything. But now I had a second chance, and I swore I'd make it right. I got up early the next morning and found my sister-in-law already outside sweeping snow. I told her I'd set rabbit snares the night before and needed to go check them. She smiled, but I could tell she wasn't sure she believed me. Seeching overheard and came running out of the outhouse, begging to come along. He said rabbits were fast, and I'd need help catching them. Ying heard too and wanted to join. I told them both to bundle up, and the three of us headed out. My sister-in-law stood in the doorway looking stunned. She still couldn't quite believe I'd actually gone out and set traps. I carried a basket on my back and held each kid by the hand as we walked west. Seeching kept asking where the rabbits were. Ying, who was sharper, guessed I'd set wire snares. We checked the first spot. Both snares were empty, no tracks in the fresh snow. Seeching squatted down with his lip poked out. Ying kicked him lightly and told me it was fine. We'd already eaten meat yesterday. I rubbed her head and said there were more snares up ahead. We checked 4 or 5 more spots, all empty. Seeching started lagging behind, dragging his feet. I took his hand and knew he was only tired because he was disappointed. Ying scolded him for wanting to come in the first place. He shot back to the front to prove he wasn't tired. I pulled another empty snare from under a woodpile. Ying asked if maybe someone had stolen the rabbits. I showed her the wire was still loose. Nobody had touched it. Nothing had been caught. She started telling me it was okay, that there was still a little meat saved for New Year's, when suddenly Seeching shouted from up ahead. "Uncle, a rabbit." "I see a rabbit." Ying hadn't even finished her sentence when Seeching spotted it, a gray rabbit struggling in one of my snares by a woodpile. It stood out clear against the white snow. The kids were thrilled. I pulled the rabbit out, tossed it in the basket, and rolled up the wire. Seeching was drooling just looking at it. Ying tried to act calm, but her eyes gave her away. I told them both that as long as I was around, we'd have meat not just today, but every day. Seeching's eyes went wide, and when I nodded, he jumped for joy. I told him to keep it down so nobody would hear, and we kept going. By the time we collected all 13 snares, we had 5 rabbits, 2 dead, 3 still alive. 2 snares had broken because the wire was too old and rusty, otherwise I'd have caught 7. We headed home. Seeching ran ahead. Ying tried to help carry the basket, but I wouldn't let her. My sister-in-law had just gone back inside when Seeching burst into the yard screaming about rabbits. Ying scolded him to be quiet. My brother had heard the news and tried to sit up to see, but his body wouldn't cooperate. He broke a sweat and still couldn't get upright. My sister-in-law told him she'd bring them in. She brought me a small knife from a drawer my brother pointed out. I sharpened it on a big bowl, then got to work skinning the rabbits. First one took 10 minutes, second one under 5, and after that I was flying. I cleaned the insides too. Heart, liver, kidneys, all edible. I carried the meat inside for my brother to see. His eyes went wide at the full basin. Seeching brought in the 5 rolled-up pelts. My brother touched the fur and smiled, then told the boy to get them off the warm bed before they spoiled. I asked for salt to rub into the skins so they'd cure properly. I butchered 3 of the rabbits. My sister-in-law tried to stop me at 2, saying it was more than enough, but I insisted the kids needed the food. I buried the other 2 in the snow outside to keep for later. My sister-in-law boiled water, tossed in the meat with garlic and green onions, and set it to stew. While we waited, I went out back, found some thin wooden poles, and built a drying rack in my room for the salted pelts. By the time everything was done, we were all starving. We'd been busy since dawn. But nobody complained, because there was meat. I sat with the kids gnawing on rabbit while my sister-in-law fed broth and torn up pieces to my brother. She'd only taken a few spoonfuls to him when she noticed someone walking into our yard. In my past life, by this point my brother had already killed himself and the whole village knew. People came by to pay their respects. But this time he was alive, so I had no idea who it could be. Then I heard my sister-in-law's voice from the courtyard. "Yuan? You're here to see Shaoan?" Chen Yuan showed up at our door in her fancy new floral coat and stylish pants. Her family had money since her dad was the only one who could drive the production team's tractor. My sister-in-law pulled her inside, all excited, thinking this was a nice visit from my girlfriend. My brother started showing off right away, pointing out the rabbit meat on the table, making sure Yuan knew I'd caught it. In his eyes, I was the weaker one in this relationship and needed all the help he could give. But I already knew why she was here. Zhao Shuang had told her I'd been fired, and she'd come to dump me. She sat down and started eyeing the rabbit meat, probably planning to eat first and break up with me after. I didn't give her the chance. You're here to break up with me, right? Let's not waste time. My brother and sister-in-law froze. Yuan was stunned. I'd stolen every line she'd prepared. She recovered and started lecturing me about how my family couldn't afford the 200 yuan bride price, couldn't buy a bicycle or a watch or any of the things a proper groom was supposed to provide. My sister-in-law looked down, embarrassed. My brother sighed, but I just laughed. I told her 200 was way too much for her. 2 yuan sounded about right. I said I actually had 2 yuan in my pocket, but I still wouldn't marry her. She stormed out cursing. My sister-in-law lost her appetite. She pulled out the 20 yuan I'd given her and tried to hand it back, telling me to buy Yuan something and make up. My brother said the same. Take the rabbits, go apologize, try to fix things. I told them both to stop worrying. A woman who runs the moment things get hard isn't someone worth marrying. Even if we could afford the bride price, I wouldn't want her. I said if I ever married, I want someone like my sister-in-law, someone who actually takes care of her family. My sister-in-law's eyes turned red. I took the bowl from her hands and told her to sit down and eat while I fed my brother his soup. He'd never seen me do that before. Not once had I ever offered to take over so she could rest. My brother smiled and said I'd finally grown up. What none of them knew was what Yuan and I had cooked up in my past life. Back then, I'd actually suggested a scheme to her. I'd pretend we were breaking up so my brother and sister-in-law would panic and scrape together the bride price money. Yuan would collect it, and whether she actually married me was another question. She would have kept the money either way. Right now, walking home, Yuan was convinced I was running that exact plan. She figured I was catching rabbits to butter up my family, and soon I'd come crawling to her door with gifts and cash. She was already humming a little song, planning to soak the rabbits in salt water before frying them up. She had no idea I meant every word I said. Yuan ran home, set out a basin of salt water, and sat by her window waiting for me to show up with rabbits and an apology. She'd be waiting a long time. I'd already forgotten about whatever scheme we'd cooked up in my past life. That was over 40 years ago for me, and honestly, even if I remembered, I'd never do it now. We finished eating around 8. Siqing had stuffed himself so full he could barely stand, waddling around the room in circles like a little donkey at a grinding mill, hiccuping with every step. The whole family couldn't stop laughing. My sister-in-law told me to go rest since I'd been up late and woke early, but I wasn't tired at all. This young body felt stronger than I remembered. I didn't get cold, didn't get sleepy. Instead of resting, I grabbed the broom and swept the whole yard. My sister-in-law had only cleared a small path that morning. She wasn't lazy. She just had too much work for one person and had to save her energy where she could. She watched me through the window and smiled. Then she went back to my brother's room and they started talking quietly. My brother was still staring at the ceiling, and I knew he hadn't given up on killing himself. My sister-in-law had tried to talk him out of it yesterday, but couldn't. Only my threat to leave had stopped him. Now that things were a little better, she was hoping he'd change his mind, but he wouldn't say one way or another. She wiped her tears and kept sweeping the floor. When I came inside and saw her crying, I understood right away. Talking to my brother was useless. He was the most stubborn man alive. So I decided on a different plan. Make the family's life so good that dying would seem ridiculous. Once we had enough food and money, I'd like to see him try to argue he was a burden. I told them I wanted to borrow a cart from the production team and go up the mountain for firewood. My brother shut me down immediately. The mountain was sealed by snow, I didn't know the trails, and there were wolves. He said even when he could still walk, he wouldn't dare go in there alone. He had a point about the wolves. In my past life as a ranger, I'd killed plenty of them, but I'd had a hunting rifle then. Right now, all I had was a chopping knife. I couldn't be reckless. A gun would solve everything, though. Just as I was thinking that, the door opened. I heard Ying greet someone. Uncle Yin. I recognized that voice instantly. It was old Yin, the village's veteran hunter. And suddenly, I had an idea. Old Yin came in with his daughter Xiaohu, leaning on his crutch. He'd brought 4 eggs for my brother and sister-in-law. His chickens had laid a couple, and he wanted to help. He sat down next to my brother, and they started joking around like old friends, talking about fishing in Shelley River once spring came. I barely said hello because my mind was already spinning. Old Yin was the village's only hunter. 3 generations of his family had hunted these mountains. He had a rifle, and I needed one badly. He didn't think much of me. Nobody did. He'd walked in and seen Ying washing dishes while I just sat there. To him, I was the same lazy kid who drank and gambled and never lifted a finger. He only tolerated me because of my brother. My brother asked him about the mountain trails and whether it was possible to get up there for firewood. Old Yin said the snow was deep, but the paths were passable if you knew the way. The real danger was the animals. That was my opening. I asked if he'd lend me his rifle. I told him if I killed a wolf, I'd split the meat with him 50-50. He shut me down cold, called me a kid, said I'd get eaten, and told my brother to control me. I kept pushing. Meat? Half of everything. Come on. But he grabbed his crutch and practically ran out the door. The more I begged, the faster he moved. My brother explained after he left. Old Yin had 2 treasures in his life, his daughter Xiaohu and that rifle. He'd been a great hunter until he ran into a tiger years ago. Shot at it, ran, fell into a ravine, and broke his leg permanently. After that, he couldn't hunt anymore, but he still cleaned that gun every single day. Nobody was allowed to touch it. I knew something about Xiaohu that nobody else did yet. In my past life, after I'd moved to the mountain as a ranger, I heard that Old Yin got sick. Xiaohu took his rifle and went into the mountain alone to hunt. She wanted to sell meat to pay for his medicine. She'd never been in the woods before. The wolves got her. If the village head hadn't sent a search party, they wouldn't have even found her body. So that gun was just sitting there, useless, while Old Yin's leg kept him home and his daughter was forbidden from touching it. What a waste. To calm my brother down about the mountain trip, I made up a story, said my old co-worker from the construction crew lived on the other side of the mountain and his dad was a hunter with a gun. I'd go with them, so it would be safe. My brother relaxed a little and said I could go, but I'd need to borrow a horse cart from the production team leader. He told me to bring the 2 extra rabbits as a gift. I refused. Those rabbits were for the kids. I stared out the window, frustrated. During the day, there wasn't much I could hunt without a gun. I had to figure out how to get Old Yan's rifle. It was doing nothing sitting in his house, in my hands. It could feed this whole family. My sister-in-law tried to convince me to give up the rabbits to borrow the cart, but I wouldn't budge. My brother explained the situation. The production team only had 3 vehicles and 2 mules, and the team leader couldn't just lend them out as a personal favor. Everybody in the village was watching. You had to bring something decent if you wanted to borrow equipment. I told them to stop worrying and went to the shed to look for tools. All I found were the same net and knife I'd been using, plus some farming stuff, pickaxes, hoes, pitchforks. Nothing useful for hunting. I went to the outhouse, and while I was there, I noticed the iron chisel leaning against the wall. Every household in the Northeast had one for breaking up the frozen pit in winter. I grabbed it and suddenly remembered. Old Yin had mentioned fishing with my brother. That's when it hit me. There was a river on the east side of the village, the East River, fed by the Songjiang. It had all kinds of fish. In my past life, I used to swim there in summer with my drinking buddies and catch fish to roast on the spot. Never once brought any home for the family. Decades later, the river died. The upstream villages turned the banks into garbage dumps and poisoned the water. But right now, in 1980, it was still clean and full of fish. I grabbed the chisel, pickaxe, net, and a bamboo basket and jogged over to the river. Chopping a hole in the ice was simple but exhausting. I picked a flat spot, cleared the snow, checked for cracks. Falling through would mean certain death, and started hammering. It took me over 40 minutes to open one hole. By the time I scooped out the floating ice chunks, I was drenched in sweat. I couldn't start fishing right away. Under the ice, the fish were starved for oxygen. Once they sensed the opening, they'd come, but it took time. I gathered some dry grass and twigs, lit a small fire, and sat beside it to dry my soaked undershirt. Getting a chill out here would be stupid, no matter how strong this young body felt. After about 15 minutes, I crept back to the hole with my net and peered in. Nothing at first. I was just thinking about cutting a second hole when a dark shape drifted into view. I plunged the net in, swirled it around, and heaved upward. It was heavy, way heavier than I expected. I leaned back so hard I fell on my backside. 5 little crucian carp flopped on the ice, each about the size of my palm. Good enough to fry up, but they weren't what had made the net so heavy. I looked up and saw something thrashing in the snow a few feet away. A big carp, over a foot long, had launched itself right out of the net and was flopping around on the ice. I laughed out loud when I saw that big carp flopping in the snow. I grabbed it by the gills and tossed it in the basket. One wasn't enough, though. I wanted at least two. I squatted by the hole and kept scooping. Within an hour, I had 13 crucian carp, 8 catfish-looking things, 2 big carp around 30 centimeters each, a grass carp, and a bunch of smaller ones I couldn't even count. More than enough to eat and to give as gifts for borrowing the cart. I got so caught up that I forgot I was freezing. It was like those fishing addicts I'd seen in my past life glued to their spots all day. Once you start pulling fish out, you can't stop. Finally, I sneezed and realized I was shivering. My undershirt was still soaked from all the sweating earlier. Before I left, I packed snow into the hole. I'd read online in my past life that snow keeps the hole from freezing solid. So next time, I'd only need a few taps to break through. No idea if it actually worked, but I'd find out. I hauled everything home. My sister-in-law nearly panicked when she saw me stumbling and shaking from the cold. Then she saw the basket full of fish, and her eyes went wide. She scolded me about how dangerous ice holes were. Some old man in the village had fallen through one 2 years ago, and they never found his body. But she still rushed to stoke the fire and heat up the leftover rabbit stew so I could warm my insides. While I was at the river, my sister-in-law and the kids had been studying my rabbit snares, trying to figure out how to make their own. Ying had already worked out the trick with the sliding knot. Once I warmed up, I started cleaning the fish. I scraped the scales, gutted them, kept the swim bladders and fat, but threw away the intestines. My sister-in-law thought I was being wasteful. She wanted to save the scales for gelatin and clean the guts to eat. I told her we had plenty of meat now, and I could always go back for more. No point risking parasites. My brother suggested sending the 2 big carp to the team leader to borrow the cart. I agreed. Fish I could replace, but we needed that firewood before the dead of winter hit. My sister-in-law said she'd come with me to the river in the afternoon, and we could catch more to freeze and store. Sicheng begged to come too. She snapped at him about falling through the ice, but I said he could tag along as long as he stayed away from the edge. Both kids lit up. We set up the table and everyone pitched in. Ying picked up fish scales, Sicheng washed the cleaned fish, and I kept gutting. My sister-in-law went to cook lunch. My brother lay on the bed watching us all buzzing around, chatting and laughing. The table piled high with fish, rabbit stew bubbling in the kitchen. Just yesterday he'd been ready to kill himself because he thought this family was finished. Now he stared at the ceiling with a look on his face like he couldn't believe any of this was real. Things were finally looking up. It took the kids and me half an hour to clean all the fish. Wild river fish aren't fat like the farmed ones from the future. Hardly any oil inside. Just a few swim bladders. Ying collected the scales, Sicheng washed the cleaned fish, and we filled a whole basin. I set aside the 2 big carp for the team leader and buried them in the snow to keep fresh. Winter days were short. It got dark by 5 or 6. We needed to eat lunch fast and get back to the river while there was still light. After lunch, the 4 of us headed out. Me, my sister-in-law, and the 2 kids. I carried the pickaxe, Sicheng grabbed the net, and my sister-in-law wore the basket on her back. The ice hole hadn't frozen solid yet, just a thin layer on top. My snow trick had worked. I broke the ice open, lit a fire nearby, and started fishing. My sister-in-law tried first, but couldn't spot the fish. I took over and waited. After 5 or 6 minutes, Sicheng, standing far back, but staring at the water like a hawk, screamed that he saw fish. Ying smacked him on the neck and told him to shut up before he scared them away. The first few nets were all small fish. I was getting frustrated. The big ones had disappeared. My sister-in-law told me to be grateful for what we had, but I was thinking about money. Small fish were worthless at the black market in town, but a big carp could sell for $1.50. Then I felt something heavy slam into the net. I pulled with everything I had, but couldn't lift it. I told my sister-in-law to back up. After a few seconds of straining, the net finally broke the surface, and I went flying backward onto my backside again. At this rate, my rear end would split into 4 pieces. Sicheng started yelling. On the ice lay a massive carp, over 40 centimeters long, plus a big white fish and a handful of smaller ones. That got me fired up. We took turns. My sister-in-law scooped while I warmed by the fire, then we switched. The kids ran fish back to the basket. We kept going until sunset. When I tried to lift the basket, I couldn't get it off the ground with one hand. The kids laughed at me. I looked inside, and it was half full. Ying had been keeping quiet about how much we'd caught. She wanted it to be a surprise. She grinned and said that during my sister-in-law's turn alone, she'd caught more than what I'd brought home that morning. We hauled everything back, frozen stiff. The kids dove onto the warm bed the second we got inside. After we all thawed out, my sister-in-law told me to hurry and deliver the fish to the team leader before dark. She tried to swap out my 2 morning carp for bigger ones from the afternoon haul, but I said no. The big ones were for the family. She wanted me to bring extra. I told her 2 was enough. I was going to borrow a cart, not court the man. Too many gifts wouldn't change the price anyway. I dug the 2 carp out of the snow and headed for the team leader's house. After I left, my sister-in-law stood at the gate confused. She couldn't figure out why I'd only brought 2 fish instead of more. My brother explained it to her. If you bring too much the first time you ask a favor, what do you bring the next time? She slapped her forehead and said she'd never have thought of that. Then they both wondered how I'd gotten so smart all of a sudden. My brother figured I must have picked it up from the people at the construction crew. They started talking about Yuan. My brother was relieved I'd handled the breakup calmly. He'd been worried I'd fall apart. My sister-in-law said she was glad too, since Yuan's parents weren't easy people to deal with. Then my brother told her to start looking around for someone better for me once things settled down. That's when my sister-in-law brought up old Yan's daughter, Xiaohu. She said the girl had lost her mother at 6 or 7 and had been running the household with her dad ever since. She was hardworking, good-natured, pretty too, just didn't dress up much. My brother admitted she was a good girl, but worried old Yan wouldn't approve of me because of my reputation. My sister-in-law argued I'd changed and that old Yan would come around once he saw it. They decided to wait a bit before saying anything to me. Meanwhile, I was at Team Leader Lu's house. When he saw me with the fish, he got upset right away, told me to take them home and feed my brother. He assumed my sister-in-law had caught them and sent me to deliver them. I had to stop him and explain that I'd kept plenty for the family and was actually here to ask a favor. I told him I needed to borrow a horse cart to haul firewood from the mountain. He thought I was crazy. The mountain was snowed in, there were wolves, and even tigers up there. I explained I had a friend from the construction crew who lived near the mountain and whose father was a hunter. We'd go together. Then I told him I'd been fired from the construction job. He scolded me for it, said my brother had gone through so much trouble to get me that position. I didn't argue. He was right. And anyway, this wasn't really my fault. It was more about old Yang who'd arranged the job. But I didn't get into that. What surprised him was that I actually listened. Every other time he'd lectured me, I'd either walk away or ignore him. This time I nodded and agreed. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. He tried to give me firewood from his own supply, but I turned him down. I wanted to handle this myself. When he said the cart belonged to the production team, and even my brother would have to pay, I told him I understood. Public property, public rules. How much? He looked shocked again. The old me would have expected everything for free. He invited me inside to work out the cost, and told me to leave the fish outside and take them home. I followed him in with the fish still in my hands. I wasn't taking them back. No matter how good the friendship, you can't keep making withdrawals without putting something in. Team Leader Lu's wife was crouching by the stove when we walked in. I handed her the 2 carp and she took them right away, already reaching for scissors to clean them, even though her mouth was saying I shouldn't have. Old Lu glared at her, but couldn't do much about it. He sat me down and worked out the cost on paper. A day's labor was 10 work points, winter counted double, and a mule was worth 10 times a person. That came to 20 work points at 7 li each, 1 yuan and 40 fun. He offered to knock off a bit for my family's situation, but I told him to charge the full price. If he gave me a discount, it would make things awkward when someone else came to borrow. He looked at me with something close to respect and said I'd really grown up. He wrote out an official slip and handed it over. When I called him team leader, he told me to drop the formality and call him big brother like my brother did. After I left, his wife told him she didn't believe a word I'd said, figured I was going off to drink with Zhao Shuang, and had been tricked into spending the money. Old Lu disagreed. The old me would never have paid full price or brought fish as a gift. Something had changed. He decided to visit my brother the next day to check on things himself. Back home, my sister-in-law and the kids had already cleaned most of the afternoon's catch, half a basin of gutted fish. I picked out a medium-sized white fish from the basket and headed to the production team's stable on the far west side of the village. The mules and donkey were kept in a shelter there, watched over by an old man named Yang Laowu. Old Yang was the last of 6 brothers. The others had all died one way or another. He had no wife, no kids, nobody. The team leader had given him this job out of pity, feeding the animals in exchange for food and a roof. I gave him the fish and the borrowing slip and asked him to feed the mule an extra meal in the morning so it'd have strength for the mountain. He said he didn't need any fish for that. It was his job. But he took it anyway and reminded me to be careful around ice holes. I was finally heading home to rest when a familiar figure came running up the road. Zhao Shuang. He'd spotted me coming out of the stable with fish and immediately tried to throw his arm around my shoulder, asking if I had any big ones to spare. I shoved Zhao Shuang away and he went tumbling. He jumped up screaming threats, rolling up his sleeves like he wanted to fight. I didn't bother with any of that posturing. I grabbed his collar and punched him square in the eye. He started cursing again, so I kicked him into the ditch. Then he crossed a line. He called my brother a cripple and said he'd make sure I never married Yuan. I grabbed a thick stick from a woodpile and swung it at his head. He threw his arms up just in time. If he hadn't, I would have pulled back, but he didn't need to know that. The blow knocked him into the snow, and he lay there clutching his arm and howling. Old Yang came running out of the stable and grabbed me from behind. Zhao Shuang got brave with someone holding me back and started cursing my brother again. I couldn't chase him, but I hurled the stick and nailed him right in the calf. He face-planted in the snow and limped away screaming threats. Old Yang lectured me about not getting into trouble. I told him I'd had it under control. I wasn't stupid enough to ruin my family's improving situation over trash like Zhao Shuang. Meanwhile, Zhao Shuang hobbled straight to Yuan's house. She'd been sitting by the window all day waiting for me to show up with rabbits and apologies. When the door opened and it was just Zhao Shuang, her face fell. He stirred the pot, telling her I'd been delivering fish to other families, but hadn't brought her any. She kicked him out, couldn't have people seeing a single guy at her house at night. Her parents came home from playing cards and asked if she'd broken up with me. Her dad was relieved, said the family could find someone better. Then Yuan demanded rabbit meat for dinner. Her dad took her out with a net to catch one, but after half an hour in the freezing cold, they came back empty-handed. Back at home, I didn't mention the fight. I washed my hands and helped clean the rest of the fish. My sister-in-law tried to reimburse me for the cart rental, but I told her I'd already paid. 1 yuan 40 out of the 2 I'd kept. I told them about team leader Lu offering his own firewood and trying to give me a discount, and how I'd insisted on paying full price. We cleaned the whole afternoon haul, 3 big basins of fish. My sister-in-law stewed a large carp and 2 bowls of fish bladders for dinner. I fed my brother his soup first. He sighed and said if only he could sit up, he could feed himself. His hands still worked, but lying flat made everything spill. That gave me an idea. After dinner, I asked Ying for some scrap paper and a pen. Ying gave me some paper and a pencil from her school bag. I didn't tell anyone what it was for, just said I needed to write some things down. That night, after all the chores were done, I sat by the oil lamp and spent an hour sketching and drawing on those sheets of paper. I had an idea for something that could help my brother. Before dawn, I got up and tucked the drawings into my coat. My sister-in-law was already in the kitchen. She'd woken up early just to heat fish soup, so I'd have something warm before heading to the mountain. I stood in the doorway with tears in my eyes, trying not to let her see. In my past life, she'd done this kind of thing for me all the time. Made me soup when I came home drunk, cleaned up after me when I vomited. She was more of a mother to me than a sister-in-law, and I'd repaid her by being a burden that killed her. I drank 2 bowls of hot soup, grabbed the saw and the chopping knife, and headed to the stable while it was still dark. The wind cut my face like a blade. Old Yang was just finishing feeding the mule. He shoved a dogskin hat onto my head when he saw I only had a thin cotton cap. My sister-in-law had tucked that one into my pocket along with my brother's old gloves. I hitched the mule to the cart and took the north road. I knew every path within dozens of miles from my years as a ranger. While someone unfamiliar would have gotten lost in the deep snow, I picked the shortest trail and reached the base of Horse Saddle Mountain by sunrise. The mule rolled its eyes at me when I stopped to rest. It wasn't even breathing hard. Back at home, team leader Lu showed up with 4 small apples for the kids. But the real reason he'd come was to check whether I'd actually gone to the mountain or run off drinking with Zhao Shuang. His wife had planted doubts in his head all night. He noticed Zhao Shuang hadn't shown up at the village shop that morning like he always did, which made him more suspicious. My brother and sister-in-law defended me, told him I'd been working hard, catching food for the family, helping around the house. But Lu still wasn't fully convinced. Then Old Yang walked in. He almost never left the stable, so everyone was surprised to see him. He'd come to warn my family about possible trouble. Did Xiaoan tell you? He beat up Zhao Shuang last night. My brother, my sister-in-law, and team leader Lu all stared at him, completely lost. While I was up on the mountain, things got busy back at the house. Old Yang came over first thing in the morning to warn my family that I'd beaten up Zhao Shuang the night before. My brother and sister-in-law had no idea. I hadn't told them. Old Yang explained what happened. Zhao Shuang had called my brother a cripple to my face, and I'd lost it. Team leader Lu exploded when he heard that. He started cursing and wanted to go find Zhao Shuang right then and there. But my brother stopped him. He didn't want Lu getting into trouble on our account. That was just how my brother was. Even now, sick and helpless, he'd rather swallow an insult than cause problems for the people who cared about him. My sister-in-law understood what he was doing, even though she was furious too. She could see he was trying not to be a burden to anyone, and that scared her more than Zhao Shuang ever could. After Lu and Old Yang left, my sister-in-law walked them out. Lu pulled her aside and asked what was going on with my brother. He wasn't acting like himself. She told him the truth. 2 days ago, if I hadn't threatened to leave, my brother would have killed himself. Lu stared at the window for a long time and couldn't find words. Then things got worse in a different way. Lu's wife had been gossiping at the neighbor's gate, telling everyone I'd been fired and had spent money to borrow a cart to haul firewood from the mountains in winter. Within an hour, the whole village knew. The women were laughing about it, saying I was a lost cause, a money pit, that my brother was a fool for taking me in. One of them even hinted that my sister-in-law must have other reasons for keeping me around, since my brother was paralyzed. Lu caught his wife mid-gossip and nearly threw her out. He was already furious about the Zhao Shuang situation, and hearing her trash talk my sister-in-law pushed him over the edge. He told her if she kept running her mouth with those women, she could go back to her mother's house for good. But the damage was done. The gossip spread everywhere. The whole village thought I was an idiot, wasting money on a cart to drag wood from a snowed-in mountain. Some figured I'd get lost. Others bet the wolves would get me. Even the neighbor lady, by Shuzhen, came over to mock my sister-in-law about it. She said the money was wasted, that I'd probably die up there, that my brother and sister-in-law were fools for letting me go. My sister-in-law shut her down cold. She said the money was mine to spend however I wanted, and that even if I didn't find firewood this time, I'd keep going back until I did. As long as I was willing to try, she'd support me. She defended me without hesitation. No doubt, no second-guessing, just faith that I'd come through. And I was going to prove her right. My sister-in-law handled the nosy neighbor perfectly. Bai Shuzhen came over to lecture her about wasting money, saying I was hopeless and she should take my wages away. My sister-in-law just smiled and kept sewing patches, saying even if I only brought back a few sticks, that was better than sitting at home doing nothing. The neighbor left in a huff, went home, and smacked her own lazy husband awake, yelling at him that even I was out hauling firewood while he slept all day. Back at the house, my brother kept staring at the gate, worried. My sister-in-law told him to relax. My friend's father was a hunter and surely had a gun. But when he wasn't looking, she glanced at the gate too. Her stitching had gone crooked without her noticing. Neither of them knew whether my coworker was real. Meanwhile, I was on the mountain alone. I rested at the base and then headed north along the mountainside. About half an hour in, I spotted tracks in the snow that made my blood run cold. Long, narrow prints, about 10 centimeters, for toes in a straight line. Wolf tracks, fresh ones, from the last day or two. I gripped my chopping knife and kept moving. Wolves are smart. They follow you from the shadows. Wait until you relax, then attack all at once. In my past life, even with a rifle, I never fought a wolf pack head-on. You had to sneak around behind them and take out the lead wolf first. Without the alpha, the pack falls apart. But right now I had no gun. If a pack found me, I was dead. I picked open paths where nothing could hide and moved fast. The mule was panting hard, but I couldn't let us stop. After another 30 minutes of near jogging, we finally reached the pine forest on the north side. I tied the mule to a thick tree, gave it some dried grass Old Yang had packed, and headed into the woods with my saw and knife. The forest was huge, tall pines spaced far apart, some so thick I couldn't wrap my arms around them. But I wasn't here for those giants. They were too heavy, and I'd barely fit a few on the cart. I needed medium-sized logs, and specifically, I was looking for windfall, trees already knocked down by storms. No sawing needed, just haul them to the cart. I found a snow-covered bump on the ground, kicked the snow away, and sure enough, 2 fallen pines underneath. I carried them to the cart and found 3 or 4 more nearby. Once the easy pickings were cleared, I started sawing standing trees, working close to the cart so I could keep an eye on the mule. Wild animals could wander by at any time. Half an hour later, the cart was mostly full. I needed just 2 more pieces. I started sawing into a thick pine at the base, then stood up to move to the other side for the second cut. That's when I noticed something 2 meters away, tucked under another pine tree. A big gray head with 2 stubby antlers, staring straight at me with huge round eyes. A roe deer. The famous, silly roe deer of the Northeast. I couldn't believe my luck. While I was sawing a pine tree, I looked up and found a roe deer standing 2 meters away, staring right at me with those big stupid eyes. It was a good-sized one, about a meter long, maybe 30 or 40 pounds. Even after cleaning it, that was enough meat for half a month. I threw my chopping knife at it. Missed. The blade stuck in the snow right under its head, and the deer bolted east in a flash. But here's the thing about roe deer. They're called silly for a reason. I climbed a forked pine tree and waited. Sure enough, about 15 minutes later, the same deer wandered right back to the exact same spot, looking around like it was trying to figure out what had happened. I jumped down and grabbed its neck. It shrieked, this horrible high-pitched sound that hurt my ears, trying to call for help. I held on tight and cut its throat with one stroke. It kicked a few times and went still. But now I had a problem. Blood was everywhere, and in these mountains, predators can smell it fast. I didn't have time to gut the deer. I threw it on the cart, ran back to the half-sawed tree, and cut through it as fast as I could. Then I loaded everything up, untied the mule, and got moving. The cart was heavy. The mule couldn't run fast enough, so I jumped down and pulled alongside it. I slapped its side and yelled, "Brother, move faster or we're both dead." The mule seemed to understand. It found another gear and started running. We headed downhill, which helped, but I was soaked in sweat and exhausted from pulling and steering at the same time. I didn't know it then, but 3 minutes after we left, a pack of over a dozen wolves arrived at the pine forest and started licking the deer's blood off the snow. 40 minutes later, we cleared the mountain and reached a wide ditch on the north side. I collapsed against the wheel, gasping. The mule dropped its head, panting just as hard. We rested 10 minutes, then pushed on to the north road. On the way home, I stopped at a small village called Little Poplar Gulch. There was a carpenter there named Jean. I pulled out the drawings I'd made the night before, plans for a special wheelchair. Not the regular kind that only lets you sit upright. My brother's back couldn't handle being forced straight up. I designed one with an adjustable backrest that could recline, so he could raise himself just enough to eat on his own or go outside for fresh air. I'd marked every measurement from memory. The carpenter had never seen anything like it, but the drawings were detailed enough that he took the job. I left 2 logs as partial payment and headed home. Meanwhile, my family was falling apart with worry. My sister-in-law had run to the north road 2 or 3 times looking for me. The neighbor lady was gloating at the fence, saying she'd told them I couldn't do it. Other villagers kept stopping by with horror stories about wolves and bears. My brother was staring at the ceiling, blaming himself for letting me go. Team leader Lou came over and told them not to panic. He was about to round up Old Yin and some men to go search for me. Then Seeching burst through the door, out of breath, pointing at the gate. Uncle's back. Everyone saw me pull in with a full cart of thick pine logs and a roe deer on top. My sister-in-law came running out with her coat flapping open, eyes wide. She couldn't believe it was all ours. She whispered and asked if I'd split some with my coworker. I'd almost forgotten about that lie. I told her they had their own 2 carts full. Team leader Lou had been about to organize a search party for me. He came outside, saw the load and the deer, nodded without saying much, and went home. I wanted to offer him some meat, but there were too many people watching. I'd bring it over later. The neighbors crowded around, gawking. When they asked how I'd gotten the deer, I said my friend shot it and gave me a share. That way, the story about having a hunter companion would stick, and my family wouldn't worry next time. The village women immediately started tearing me down. Bai Shuzhen sneered that it was nothing special if someone else killed it. Wang Baixiang rolled her eyes. They all agreed I was just showing off. Then little Xiqing stood up from behind the cart and fired back. Well, my uncle brought it home. If you're so tough, go get your own. My sister-in-law scolded him for being rude, but she was smiling. The women shut up and scattered. I rubbed the kid's head. That nephew of mine had guts. We unloaded the cart together. I stacked the big logs behind the house for splitting later and left the branches out front for burning right away. I returned the mule to old Yang, who noticed the animal was exhausted and promised to feed it extra. He wouldn't let me give back the dogskin hat either, said I should keep it. Back home, I was about to help my sister-in-law break up branches when she shooed me inside. She'd moved the roe deer indoors so I could clean it somewhere warm. She said if she stayed out working, I'd never go in, so she quit and dragged me inside. That's when we heard shouting from next door. Bai Shuzhen was screaming at her husband to go get firewood like I had. He mumbled that he didn't know where to go. She cursed him out, saying he always found his way home drunk so he could find his way to the mountain. A few minutes later, she knocked on our door, all smiles. Suddenly we were practically family, and she just wanted to know where I'd found the wood. She even offered to split any game her husband caught with us, 50-50, if I told them the route. My sister-in-law cut her off before I could even open my mouth. Shaoan went with someone who knew the way. He doesn't know the route himself. Bai Shuzhen wouldn't give up. She kept pushing, pulling out the most ridiculous family connections. Something about my brother's uncle's cousin's wife being related to Ying's grandmother's sister. She actually said that with a straight face. I almost laughed out loud. She offered to split any game her husband caught with us, then dropped that to just wanting firewood, then begged me to take her husband along. Each offer got more desperate. I told her flat out. The wood was somewhere on the West Mountain. I'd been led there by someone else, and I didn't know the exact route. Then I grabbed a bucket of hot water and walked into the other room. My sister-in-law followed me in without even acknowledging her. Left her standing alone in the kitchen. She finally stormed out muttering that our firewood was nothing special and headed straight to old Yan's house to ask him about mountain routes. Inside, I started skinning the roe deer. My brother asked if I'd seen wolves. I told him we'd found wolf tracks, but no actual wolves. Said my friend's father had gone looking for some to shoot, but came up empty. I kept building up this imaginary co-worker's family every chance I got. My brother noticed there were no bullet holes in the deer. I explained it wasn't shot. It had run off when they were hunting, but circled back while I was sawing wood, so I grabbed it myself. When my sister-in-law asked why it came back, I joked that it was curious about what happened. Everyone laughed. Xiqing was stroking its ears. Ying told him eating stupid deer would make him stupid too, and the poor kid actually believed her for a second. I skinned and butchered the whole animal in minutes. My brother and sister-in-law stared. I separated every joint with a knife, never hacking, just slicing through the gaps in the bones like peeling off layers. My sister-in-law said even the butchers at the state-run restaurant couldn't work that fast. I credited my imaginary friend's father again. Thank God I'd invented that man early on, because I needed him for every new skill I showed. I set aside a hind leg for team leader Lu and told the family to stew the ribs for dinner. Then I said I wanted to borrow the cart again tomorrow. My friends were going back and I could ride along for another load. My sister-in-law said we had enough, but I told her there was no point saving trees that were just standing there. My brother called for her to give me money for the rental. She pulled out 2 yuan. I took 1. Walking to Lu's house, I was thinking about the bigger picture. We had meat now, and after tomorrow we'd have enough firewood. It was time to start making real money. I needed to sell those rabbit pelts and the deer skin, but the nearest towns were far. The county seat was half a day's walk north, and Copper County to the west was even farther. I had to figure out a way to earn cash so I could get my brother proper medical treatment. But first, tomorrow's firewood run. If my brother didn't feel secure about basic needs like fuel, he'd never agree to spend money on a doctor. With that stubborn personality of his, he'd sooner die than be a burden. I turned the corner toward Lu Street and stopped. Over a dozen people were filing out of his house. From what I could hear, every single one of them had come to borrow a cart to go haul firewood from the mountain. I overheard a group of men leaving team leader Lu's house, grumbling about the cart rental price. They'd all come to borrow one after seeing my load of firewood, but once they heard it cost over a yuan per day, most decided to wait. and see if anyone else managed to bring back wood first. Next door to Lu's house, Wang Baixiang was beating her husband with a stick of firewood, screaming at him. She was yelling about how someone a full 12 years younger than him, had brought home a roe deer while he couldn't even put meat on the table. Lu's wife heard the word deer and ran inside to ask her husband about it. Lu sighed and told her about my haul. She immediately started complaining that I hadn't brought them any meat since they'd lent me the cart. I walked in right at that moment with a whole hind leg of venison. Lu tried to refuse, but his wife snatched it before he could finish his sentence. He was furious at her, but what could he do? It was already in her hands. I asked him about borrowing a cart again tomorrow. He nearly dropped his teacup. I told him one load wasn't enough for the whole winter with 2 beds and a stove to heat. He laughed and said I must be eating the firewood. But he wrote me another slip without hesitation and told me the other cart was free. Everyone who'd come asking had balked at the price. He reminded me to talk to my sister-in-law when I got home, said she'd run back and forth to the North Road 4 or 5 times looking for me. That stung. She'd taken me in when I was 10, barely older than Ying. She never treated me like a brother-in-law. I was her child. And in my past life, her child had gotten her killed. At home, my sister-in-law was just sending away another neighbor who'd come asking about the firewood route. She warned me not to tell anyone. If my friend found out I'd shared their spot, he might stop bringing me along. I dropped off a strip of meat to old Yang at the stable too. He was sitting alone eating a dry flatbread with plain water. He scolded me for being too generous, but his whole face wrinkled up into a smile. I gave him tomorrow's cart slip, and he promised to have the mule fed and ready. Back home, I salted the deer hide and hung it on the drying rack in my room next to the 5 rabbit pelts. 2 of those I was saving for the kids' gloves. The other 4 I'd sell in town once the firewood situation was settled. But pelts weren't worth much in 1980. All of them together wouldn't add up to a lot. I stared at the rack, thinking, if I could find the roe deer's den tomorrow near the pine forest, there might be more of them. The one I'd caught had run east when I scared it. That's probably where the nest was. Seeching burst in and announced dinner was ready, then added in a whiny voice that his mom wouldn't let him eat until I came. The little schemer had run over just to tattle on her. I took his hand, and we went to eat. My sister-in-law had stewed the roe deer ribs, and the whole house smelled incredible. Whatever was out in that pine forest could wait until tomorrow. Dinner was roe deer ribs stewed with potatoes, rough flour flatbread, and a small bowl of pickled mustard greens. Everyone expected me to go straight for the meat, but I couldn't stop eating that mustard. I wolfed down half the bowl with my bread before anyone could say a word. They all stared at me. In the old days, I wouldn't touch the stuff, thought it tasted weird. But after my brother and sister-in-law died, I'd spent 40 years trying to recreate my sister-in-law's recipe. Simple as it was, just mustard root, coarse salt, layered in a jar with a stone on top for a month. I could never get it right. Now here it was again, exactly how I remembered wanting it to taste, and I couldn't help myself. My sister-in-law scolded me for eating too much salt, said I'd be coughing all night. My brother told me she had half a jar in the cellar, and I could eat it every day if I wanted. Seeching leaned over to his sister and whispered, "Did Uncle get stupid from being tired?" Ying smacked him on the neck. After dinner, my sister-in-law shooed me away from cleanup and told me to rest or chat with my brother since I had another early morning. So I sat with him. Once we were alone, he asked about the fight with Zhao Shuang. Old Yang had told them everything. I kept it short. Said Zhao Shuang came begging for fish, wouldn't leave, so I chased him off. I didn't mention the part about him calling my brother a cripple. But my brother already knew. I could see it on his face. He tried to lecture me about staying out of trouble. Then he shifted to wanting me to settle down and get married. I cut him off and said if getting married was the only thing keeping him from doing something stupid, then I'd stay single on purpose. He reached for the feather duster to swat me, but with those useless legs, I snatched it away easily. I told him straight. Even if I got married, I still wouldn't abandon my sister-in-law if he wasn't around. He glared at me, speechless. After I left, my brother told my sister-in-law he'd been trying to bring up Xiaohu, old Yan's daughter, as a match for me, but I wouldn't even let him finish. She told him not to rush it. She'd noticed I hadn't mentioned Yuan once in 2 days, which was a good sign. They lay in bed talking about how much had changed. My sister-in-law counted it all up: pheasant, rabbits, basins full of fish, half a roe deer, and a cartload of firewood. all in just 2 or 3 days. One more trip tomorrow, and they'd have enough fuel to last until spring. For the first time, she felt like they might actually have a decent new year. Then my brother's face darkened. The firewood problem was solved, and there was plenty of meat. But the grain was almost gone. My sister-in-law told him not to mention it to me. I'd already done so much, she couldn't put everything on my shoulders. She'd figure something out herself. But they both knew she didn't have a plan. That night, half the village lay awake thinking about what I'd hauled home, wondering how to get some for themselves. My sister-in-law was up before dawn again, standing at the stove with a hot bowl of ribs and flatbread waiting for me. She tried to pack me a lunchbox with meat, but I told her no, the smell would attract wolves. She offered plain bread instead. I refused that too. I'd be back in a few hours, and eating in the cold wind would just make me sick. I headed to the stable. Old Yang had the mule ready early, but it was a different one. Yesterday's needed rest. We hitched it up, and I set off for the mountain. This time I took a different route. Yesterday's path had wolf tracks, so I went east first, then turned north, adding some distance but staying safer. It took 2 hours to reach the pine forest, and I ended up about 800 meters from where I'd been the day before. I started collecting fallen trees and sawing new ones. Within an hour, the cart was full again, big logs on the bottom, thinner ones on top, branches piled highest. Back in the village, the whole place was buzzing. Team leader Lou's wife had told everyone I'd borrowed a cart again. The gossip mill was running at full speed. Some people were laughing, betting I wouldn't bring anything back this time. Others were too scared of wolves to try going themselves. Old Chong, who'd been considering it, told his brother that anyone without a gun who went into those mountains was suicidal, and that it was still an open question whether I'd make it home alive. Bai Shuzhen made another trip to our house to pester my sister-in-law for the location. When that didn't work, she tried to borrow some of our firewood, said she'd pay it back in spring. My sister-in-law nearly laughed in her face. Who burns firewood in spring? She told her to send her own husband up the mountain. Bai Shuzhen couldn't even get her man to walk to the neighbor's house, let alone climb a mountain full of wolves. Before leaving, Shuzhen threw one last jab, said old Yin himself warned that the mountain was crawling with wolves, and that my sister-in-law shouldn't believe me when I said I hadn't seen any. That rattled her. She stared toward the western mountains with that worried crease in her forehead. Up on the mountain, I'd finished loading and decided to push my luck. I walked the cart east, back toward yesterday's spot, hoping to find the roe deer den. The deer had run east when I'd scared it. There might be a whole group nesting somewhere nearby. But the moment I got close, I saw fresh wolf prints everywhere. Yesterday's blood from the deer kill had drawn them in. I kept moving, eyes scanning the trees. Then the mule stopped dead. I pulled the rope, but it wouldn't budge. Animals sense danger better than people. Their noses and instincts are sharper. If the mule wouldn't move forward, something was wrong. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I felt it before I saw it, something watching me from behind. I spun around with the chopping knife raised. A wolf stood right there. Teeth bared, front legs low, back legs coiled. Before I could even breathe, it launched itself straight at my throat. The wolf lunged at my throat. I swore and threw the chopping knife up sideways, blocking its claws and jaws, then shoved it away using its own momentum. But wolves don't quit. They never give up on prey, and they're faster than any person. I didn't try to run. I planted my feet, bent my knees, and gripped the knife, eyes locked on the animal. Then I noticed something. When it landed and tried to spring back at me, its right hind leg buckled, and it stumbled. The leg was broken, the bone bending outward, almost poking through the skin. Its right eye had a fresh gash too, still bleeding. Something had already hurt this wolf badly before I showed up. That explained why I'd been able to push it off so easily. A healthy wolf would have raked my shoulders open on the way past. Still, injured or not, it was a wolf. I couldn't let my guard down for a second. I used the moment to loop the mule's rope over a tree branch so it wouldn't bolt. Then I turned back to face the wolf. We stared each other down for about 15 seconds. It kept shifting left and right, watching me with those yellow eyes, waiting for an opening. I pretended to turn my head toward the mule. The wolf took the bait and launched itself at my chest. I was ready. I held the knife blade out across my chest, right where its neck would land. As it hit me, I fell backward on purpose and slashed across its throat. It howled in pain but didn't stop. It twisted its head and went for my neck with its fangs. I tried to pull the knife free, but the wolf's front paws had it pinned to my chest. Its mouth was inches away. I punched it in the jaw with my left fist so hard I knocked one of its fangs crooked. While it flinched, I yanked the knife loose. The wolf stumbled to my left. I scrambled up, grabbed the knife with both hands, and started swinging at its skull, blade, back. I didn't care which side hit. This wasn't the time for mercy. Either it died, or I did. Half a minute later, the wolf lay still, its head split open in a dozen places, tongue hanging out, blood pooling in the snow. I crept closer and cut its throat wider to drain the blood. It didn't twitch. Dead for good. I collapsed in the snow, gasping, hands shaking, soaked in sweat. The mule was still standing nearby, trembling, having snapped a few branches trying to back away. It stared at the knife in my hand like it wasn't sure if I was safe either. I decided not to go east looking for the roe deer den. If this wolf had been hunting around here, any deer would have fled long ago. But then I noticed something. A patch of yellow fur sticking out from behind a pine tree nearby. I walked over and found a dead yellow sheep, its throat ripped open, hind legs chewed up, but body still intact. The wolf had just killed it and hadn't started eating when it spotted me and decided to go for a second meal. I laughed out loud and kicked the dead wolf. Greedy bastard. I threw both the sheep and the wolf onto the cart on top of the firewood and headed down the mountain. No other animals had shown up during the fight, so the area was probably clear. I took the same route back, moving steady but not panicking. By noon I was off the mountain and heading for the north road. Back home, Seeching had already run to the road twice looking for me. My sister-in-law's face was tight with worry. Ying kept telling her I'd been late yesterday too, trying to help. But the neighbor women were circling. Bai Shuzhen and Wang Baixiang stood at the fence making comments about how I probably wouldn't make it back this time, how wolves would get me. My sister-in-law couldn't take it anymore. She told Ying to let my brother know, then took both kids and walked all the way to the north road, past the western edge of the village. When she got there, she found she wasn't the only one watching. Half the village was scattered along the street, pretending to chat, but all looking in the same direction, west, waiting to see if I'd come back with another load or not come back at all. Half the village was standing around pretending not to watch the western road, but every one of them was waiting to see if I'd come back. Groups of men huddled on corners whispering about whether I'd been eaten by wolves. The women gossiped at fences. Team leader Lu walked up to my sister-in-law and told her to stop worrying. I was a grown man. I'd be fine. But I could tell even he wasn't completely sure. My sister-in-law had already made 3 or 4 trips to the north road with the kids. My brother was lying in bed going crazy, ordering Seeching to go stand watch at the west end of the village. The neighbor Bai Shuzhen was leaning on her fence enjoying every minute of my family's panic, suggesting they send a search party before the wolves finished me off. Then I rolled in. Full cart of pine logs, just like yesterday. The mule plodding along, me sitting on top like it was nothing. My sister-in-law came running out without her coat. Ying chased after her with it. My brother finally exhaled. People crowded around the gate. Old Zhang from the front street asked where I'd found the wood. Everyone went quiet, waiting for my answer. I told them the same thing as before. Somewhere on the west mountain, I didn't know exactly where. Wang Baixiang rolled her eyes from behind the fence and said I just didn't want to share. Another woman said loudly that I couldn't even find the place without my friend leading me. So what was the big deal? I smiled and said nothing. Let them think whatever they wanted. Then Bai Shuzhen called out from her perch on the fence stones, asking if I'd run into any wolves up there. My sister-in-law's face went dark, ready to snap at her. But I spoke first. Actually, yeah, I did. My sister-in-law spun around, panicked, reaching for me to check for injuries. Before she could get close, I pulled the branches off the top of the cart, grabbed the dead wolf by the legs, and dropped it on the ground with a heavy thud. I dropped the wolf on the ground, and everyone jumped back. My sister-in-law grabbed me and shielded the kids. The women next door screamed and ran into their yard. I kicked the wolf a couple times to show it was dead and told everyone to calm down. My sister-in-law checked me over head to toe looking for injuries. I told her I was fine. The wolf's hind leg had already been broken before I fought it, so it wasn't at full strength. Then I pulled the yellow sheep off the cart too. The wolf had just killed it and hadn't started eating when it came after me instead. Its greed cost it everything. The neighbors stared in disbelief. Old Zhang saw the mangled skull and said it had clearly been hacked to death with a blade, no bullet holes anywhere. Old Qin gave me a thumbs up, said a wolf nearly killed a guy named San Biaozi last month right here in the village. Others said they'd be too terrified to even move if they saw one. I shrugged and said one wolf alone wasn't that scary. Bai Shuzhen snapped that I was just lucky and stomped back inside, slamming her door. The other gossiping women slunk away too, but I noticed some of the men in the back of the crowd slip off toward team leader Lu's house. Sure enough, Old Yang told me later that over 20 people had rushed to Lu's place trying to borrow carts. They were practically fighting each other in his yard. But I didn't need one anymore. 2 loads was enough firewood. I told Old Yang I was done with the mountain for now. Back home, I sawed the thick branches into burnable lengths while my sister-in-law and the kids stacked everything. She asked me again if I was really okay. I told her the wolf had a broken leg and a gashed eye. It was already half dead when it found me. She told me about San Biaozi, who'd run into wolves last month and nearly lost his leg. She begged me not to go back up. Inside, my brother nearly sat upright when he saw me carrying the wolf in. That would have been a miracle if he'd actually managed it. My sister-in-law told him the whole story. I'd killed the wolf and stolen its fresh kill. My brother tried to tell me to stop going to the mountain. I cut him off, said my co-worker's father had taught me how to handle wild animals, and I wouldn't go if I didn't know what I was doing. My sister-in-law gave my brother a look, wanting him to push harder. But he caved and just told me to be careful. She glared at him. She'd wanted him to forbid it, not give permission. I started skinning the wolf, then suddenly remembered something. The storage crock in the shed was already full. I'd crammed in the rabbits, fish, and deer meat yesterday, and the deer's front legs were hanging from the ceiling beams because nothing else fit. Now I had a whole wolf and a sheep to store too, and leaving meat outside was risky with wolves prowling the village. Do we have a scale? I asked. The storage crock in the shed was already packed to the top. Rabbits, fish, deer meat, everything crammed in there. There was no room for a wolf and a sheep on top of all that. And leaving meat outside was asking for wolves to come steal it. So I made a decision. We'd sell what we couldn't store. I told my brother and sister-in-law the plan. We'd keep the good cuts, ribs, hind legs, loin, and sell the rest. My sister-in-law worried the price was too high when I said 6 or 7 mao per jean. She reminded me they'd only gotten 5.5 for their own pork. I almost lost it when I heard that. They'd practically given it away. But I bit my tongue and just explained that it was past slaughtering season now. Nobody in the village had anywhere to buy meat, and 6 mao for neck meat was fair. 7 for the better cuts. The county charged 7, so we weren't overpricing anything. I skinned the wolf and the sheep in no time. My sister-in-law worked on cutting the wolf meat into blocks while I butchered the sheep, clean, square cuts through the joints without hacking. She looked at her own jagged pieces next to mine and felt bad, but I told her it was all the same. I sawed off the sheep's horns to save, then we laid everything out. I picked up a wolf foreleg to bring to team leader Lu, but then decided to finish butchering first so we'd be ready when customers came. We carried a table outside to the yard and set up all the meat, deer, wolf, and sheep. I put the scale next to it. Before leaving for Lu's house, I told my sister-in-law the prices. 6 mao for front cuts, 7 mao for loin and rump. She thought it was expensive, but didn't argue. I caught it all, so I got to set the price. She stood there by the table in the cold, staring at the piles of meat in disbelief. A few days ago, we couldn't feed the family. Now we were selling. At Lu's house, I handed his wife a wolf foreleg. She'd been too scared to touch it at first, but the moment I said it was meat, she grabbed it and ran to the kitchen. Lu scolded her as usual, but couldn't do much about it. He told me both carts had been borrowed. Dozens of people had swarmed his house after seeing my hauls. I told him I wasn't planning to go back up tomorrow anyway. Then I asked about the village loudspeaker. He grinned when I told him I wanted to announce a meat sale. He practically jogged to the speaker room. His voice crackled across the whole village. Attention! Fong Deming's family is selling mutton, wolf meat, and venison. 7 mao per jean. Come by now. He repeated it 3 times. I was already running home. By the time I turned the corner onto our street, there were people everywhere. My sister-in-law and the kids were already weighing and selling. The meat rush had started before I even got back. People were already crowding around the table when I got back. My sister-in-law was overwhelmed. She'd never had this many customers at once. She couldn't hear who wanted what and couldn't stop people from grabbing at the meat with their hands. I squeezed through and took over. I told everyone to back up and line up one at a time. Old Zhang went first. 3 jean of sheep rump, 2 yuan 17. Team leader Lu showed up and yelled at everyone to form a proper line. After that, things went smooth. Most people only bought 1 or 2 Jin, some just a few Liang. But there were so many of them that the meat disappeared fast. Then Shindafa, Yuan's father, stepped up with his big, yellow-toothed grin and asked for a discount because of our close relationship. I shut that down in front of everyone. I said loud and clear that Yuan and I were done, that he didn't want his daughter marrying me, and I still needed to find a wife. So what relationship was he talking about? The crowd started whispering. He turned red and left without buying anything. My sister-in-law smiled and asked me quietly if I was really done with Yuan. I said we'd split up, and I wasn't about to let her father squeeze us for discounts after demanding all those expensive wedding gifts. Bai Shuzhen showed up late and tried to get me to sell her sheep loin for 6 mao instead of 7, since we were neighbors. I told her 7, not a fun less. She paid up, muttering about me having no human feelings as she walked out. Then Chang Yushan appeared, the big guy in the army coat. He wasn't interested in meat. He wanted to buy the pelts. Offered 7 mao per Jin for the skins, trying to get a deer hide worth over 10 yuan for practically nothing. I nearly laughed in his face. I told him skins weren't for sale at any price. Then he asked about the sheep head. I told him sure, 7 mao a Jin, but when I brought it out, he saw I'd already sawed the horns off. His face dropped. He said never mind and left. My sister-in-law was confused. She asked what that was about. Why would someone want horns and skins, but not meat? I told her I'd explain later. Too many people around. In less than half an hour, everything was gone. The people at the back of the line went home empty-handed. Lu headed out. We carried the table back inside. The kids collapsed on the bed. They'd been running back and forth handing out meat and working the scale. My brother asked if we'd really sold it all. My sister-in-law was beaming. She said I'd been right. We hadn't even had enough to go around. I sat down and started butchering the legs we'd kept for ourselves. My pockets were stuffed with crumpled bills I hadn't even counted yet. I told the family we'd try wolf meat for dinner. None of us had ever tasted it. Then my sister-in-law remembered and asked me again, what was Chang Yushan after with the skins and the sheep horns? My sister-in-law asked about Chang Yushan and the pelts. I explained it to them. A single deer hide could sell for over 10 yuan, and that guy had tried to buy it by the Jin at 7 mao. He would have gotten it for practically nothing and flipped it for a huge profit. The sheep horns were medicine too. You scrape off a bit, dissolve it in hot water, and it cures fevers and colds in kids. That's why he wanted the head, and why I'd sawed the horns off before putting it on sale. My brother asked how I knew all this. I almost said I'd seen it on short videos, caught myself just in time, and credited my imaginary friend's dad again. I asked my brother if old Yin, being a hunter, didn't know about pelts and herbs. My brother laughed and said old Yin only knew how to shoot things. Good skins he kept, bad ones he threw away, never sold any. Didn't know a thing about medicine either. When Xiaohu had a fever as a child, the man panicked like a headless chicken. I found that hard to believe. 3 generations of hunters, and he didn't know basic mountain remedies? I figured old Yin just kept his knowledge to himself. Either way, that rifle was wasted in his hands. I took some lungs, a liver, and intestines to old Yang at the stable. He scolded me for bringing too much, said he still hadn't finished the fish and deer meat. I told him the lungs were for the mule, not him. He got genuinely offended. Said blowing them up and washing them clean made a perfectly good meal, and he wasn't about to waste food on livestock. I let it go. In my past life, I'd only ever fed lungs to my dog. Old Yang pulled me aside with some news. After I'd left Lu's house, people had started a bidding war over the carts. Some offered 2 yuan, almost 50% more than the normal price. Lu had gotten furious and made everyone pay the standard rate, but old Yang warned me prices might go up for me next time too. Back home, I cleaned the organs in the yard to keep the smell out of the house, then brought them in for cooking. My sister-in-law put the sheep liver on to boil. While I was doing all this, my brother and sister-in-law had been having a private conversation I didn't know about. My sister-in-law had told him how I'd publicly shut down Yuan's father at the meat sale. They were both thrilled I was truly done with her. Then she brought up Xiaohu, old Yan's daughter. She said the girl was pretty, hard-working, a year younger than me, and several matchmakers had already approached old Yan over the summer. They needed to move fast before someone else snatched her up. My brother agreed and said if I settled down, he could face our parents in the afterlife with a clear conscience. My sister-in-law's smile froze when she heard that. He was still thinking about dying. I sat down to count the money from the sale, but before I could pull it out, my brother called me over to talk. Then the front door opened. My sister-in-law called out cheerfully, welcoming someone named Meng Meng. I paused. Meng Meng, that was young Meng Meng, the village doctor's daughter. What was she doing here? My sister-in-law called me out to the front. Young Meng Meng, the village doctor's daughter, was standing at the door with a dozen or so young people from the village, including, I noticed, Chun Yuiyuan hiding behind someone in the back. Meng Meng was the local kid leader, tough, loud, not at all like her cute name. When I first came to the village at 10, she'd help me fit in with everybody. She was also Dr. Shin's daughter, which mattered to me because I'd need that doctor for my brother's treatment. I brought them all to my small room since my brother was lying shirtless in the main bedroom. Meng Meng spotted the pelts hanging on the rack and punched my shoulder, impressed. She wanted the whole wolf-killing story, but I brushed it off, said I just hit it with a knife, nothing special. Then she casually asked where exactly on the West Mountain I'd found the firewood. I asked her if her dad had managed to borrow a cart. She got flustered and admitted he hadn't. Both carts were booked solid through the day after tomorrow. That hit me like a brick. I needed a cart to pick up the wheelchair I'd ordered from the carpenter. Now both were reserved, one by the Chong family, the other by Yuan Yuan's father. I hadn't planned for this. Meng Meng called on Yuan Yuan to confirm her family had borrowed the second cart. Yuan Yuan had been hiding in the corner, trying to stay invisible. Her father had sent her to find out where I got the wood. But after our breakup, she hadn't wanted to come, until she heard I'd made several dozen yuan selling meat in one afternoon. That was enough for 2 watches. She'd tagged along hoping to eavesdrop on the location and maybe work her way back into my good graces. I told them all the same thing. I didn't know exactly where the spot was. Meng Meng seemed to sense something between me and Yuan Yuan and changed the subject. She hinted that she was bored with nothing to do. I guess that was the real reason she'd come, looking for some direction in life. But before we could talk more, Siqing yelled that dinner was ready. After they left, we ate wolf hind leg and sheep liver. The wolf meat was a bit gamey and salty, but my sister-in-law had boiled it long enough to take the edge off. The kids gnawed on leg bones with grease all over their faces. I fed my brother, and he tried to bring up finding me a wife. My sister-in-law jumped in and started saying something about introducing someone. I cut them both off and spooned hot soup into my brother's mouth before he could finish his sentence. They didn't get another word in the whole meal. After dinner, I finally counted the money. 75 jin of meat sold, minus about 3 jin of giveaway scraps. The neck meat at 6 mao brought in 4 yuan. Everything else at 7 mao came to about 45 yuan 78. With the 20 fin already in my pocket, that made exactly 50 yuan. My sister-in-law's eyes went huge. My brother was stunned too. They'd sold nearly 100 jin of pork from their own pig and made less than this. I gave 40 to my sister-in-law and kept 10 for myself. She refused at first, but I told her the family needed it. Then I told them I was going to the county town tomorrow to sell the pelts. My brother insisted my sister-in-law should go with me. I said no. I'd lived in that town for months. I could handle it alone. I went back to my room and started scraping the last bits of fat off the skins so they'd fetch a better price. After I left, my brother and sister-in-law looked at each other, worried. They whispered to each other. Could I really manage selling things by myself? I'd never done it before. My brother refused to spend money on his own treatment. When my sister-in-law suggested using some of the money I'd given her for injections, he shut it down immediately, said every yuan should be saved for my future wedding. She didn't dare push harder. I woke up before dawn again. This time I wasn't heading to the mountain, but I still couldn't lie around. I lit the stove, stacked the firewood, and went outside to saw the big pine logs into burnable lengths and split them with an axe. By the time Ying called me for breakfast, I'd prepared enough fuel for the whole day. After eating, I tucked the rolled-up pelts under my arm and headed out toward the county town. But I didn't go straight there. A few hundred meters up the east road, I turned into a small yard, Dr. Shin's house. She was surprised to see me and tried to drag me inside. She was unusually warm, which threw me off. For years, she'd barely acknowledged me because of my reputation. But I had no time for tea. I asked her to go give my brother a few shots of penicillin. His back had been inflamed from lying in bed so long, and while antibiotics wouldn't cure his paralysis, they'd stop things from getting worse. She sighed and said she'd told my sister-in-law the same thing, but my brother refused every time. So I whispered a little trick, told her exactly what to say to get past his stubbornness. She laughed and said only a real brother would know how to handle him. I tried to pay her 3 yuan, 9 mao for the medicine and the rest for her work. She stuffed the extra back in my pocket and said family doesn't charge family. I didn't argue. Mingming came out in her pajamas and apologized about bringing Yuan along the night before. She said she hadn't known about our breakup. I told her it was fine and left before she could ask anything else. Behind me, I heard Dr. Shun ordering Mingming to get dressed, grab the medicine box, and come along to practice giving injections. Mingming groaned, but didn't dare refuse. I smiled to myself. So this was when Shin started training her daughter to become a doctor. In my past life, by the time I'd come back to the village with money, Mingming had already. I shook off the memory. On my way north, I passed Yuan's uncle and his wife heading west with a saw and knife, arguing the whole way. They were going to the mountain for firewood. It was already late morning. By the time they got up there, there'd be nothing to find except wolves looking for lunch. But that wasn't my problem. I had to focus. The pelts would bring in decent money, but what I really needed was grain. The family was almost out. The problem was that buying grain required ration tickets, and we didn't have any. If we had, my sister-in-law would have already used them. There was one possibility. I remembered a guy who operated in the black market. In my past life, he'd gotten arrested at the end of this year. If he was still around, I might be able to buy grain without tickets. I hugged the pelts tighter and picked up my pace toward the county town. I stopped at Dr. Shin's house on my way to the county and told her exactly what to say to my brother. I knew him. He'd refuse treatment to save money. So I gave her my secret weapon. Tell him if he doesn't take the shots, I'll split the household when I get back, and he can take care of himself. 3 yuan for 3 days of penicillin injections. She tried to only charge me for the medicine, but I insisted on paying properly. She stuffed the extra change back in my pocket anyway. Sure enough, when she got to the house, my brother put up a fight. Said the money was mine and shouldn't be wasted on him. My sister-in-law tried to convince him. He asked if the medicine could be returned. Shin said yes, but then delivered my message. If he refused the needles, I'd move out when I got back. He went silent. My sister-in-law was trying not to laugh. Ming, who'd come along to practice giving injections, had to cover her mouth. My brother lay there fuming, but didn't say no. My sister-in-law pinned his arm down, and that was that. Walking to town, I sneezed twice and grinned. Old saying goes, 1 sneeze means someone's thinking of you. 2 means someone's cursing you. That was definitely my brother. It took me almost 2 hours to reach Lin County. The place wasn't much, a few 3- or 4-story buildings in the center, small shops lining the streets, horse carts and bicycles, but not a single car. I followed my memory from my past life through a series of turns until I found the purchasing station on the west side of town center. Inside, a man in his 40s or 50s sat behind a counter reading a newspaper. The room was warm. A little iron stove was burning through half a barrel of coal. The man spotted my pelts immediately. I laid them all out. 1 deer skin, 1 sheep skin, 1 wolf skin, and 3 rabbit hides. He was impressed right away, especially by the wolf pelt with no bullet holes, just knife marks on the skull. Said he'd been working here 8 years and never seen anyone kill a wolf with a blade. He went through them one by one. The damaged rabbit hide, 1 yuan 50. The 2 good rabbit hides, 2 yuan total. The deer skin was a bit small, 12 yuan, though a bigger one could fetch 15. The sheep skin was also small, 16 yuan. The wolf skin was in good shape, 30 yuan. He asked me what I thought. The prices were fair. 3 rabbit pelts for 5 yuan 50, deer skin 12, sheep skin 16, wolf skin 30. Total, 63 yuan and 5 mao. The buyer was impressed, said in 8 years he'd never seen someone kill a wolf with just a knife. He told me to come back anytime, gave me his schedule, and promised top prices. With the money from yesterday's meat sale and what was left after paying for my brother's medicine, I had just over 70 yuan in my pocket. More cash than this family had seen in a long time. But I couldn't just buy what I wanted. This was 1,980. You needed ration tickets for grain. I remembered a black market ticket seller from my past life, a guy people called Zhang the Cripple, who worked out of a narrow alley behind the bookstore. His partner, Old White the Mute, had already been arrested. Zhang himself would get caught within a couple weeks. But right now, he was still in business. I knocked on his black-painted door. He was cautious, checking the alley before letting me in. I dropped Old White's name, and he relaxed. I bought tickets for 10 jean of white flour, 10 jean of rice, and 10 jean of corn flour, plus a sugar ticket. Cost me 2 yuan 70 for the tickets alone. Then I headed to the department store and started shopping. Rice, 10 jean, 2 yuan 50 including the ticket cost. White flour, 10 jean, 1 yuan 70. Corn flour, 10 jean, 1 yuan. Salt, 5 jean, 65 fun. White sugar, 1 jean, 78 fun. Soy sauce, 2 jean, 40 fun. 2 bars of soap, a pack of matches. Then I went to the clothing section. A red padded coat for my sister-in-law, 10 yuan. She'd been wearing the same dirty one since I arrived. Little rabbit pattern gloves for Ying, 3 yuan, the trendy kind. Cotton gloves for Siqing, 150. New school bags for both kids, 3 yuan each. 2 boxes of red tassel crayons for Ying, 16 fun. And 2 tins of Wanziqianhong brand skin cream for my sister-in-law, 60 fun total. That stuff worked better than most modern moisturizers. I still had 39 yuan and some change left. I looked around for a big plastic barrel to store frozen meat in. The crock at home was full, and everything else was hanging from the ceiling beams. But plastic barrels didn't exist yet in 1980. Then I spotted a big industrial iron barrel in the corner, 50 liters at least. And nearby, some plastic sheeting. I smiled and walked toward the old man selling them. Line the barrel with plastic, fill it with meat, and keep it in the shed. That would work perfectly. The pelt sold. I had my cash and headed to the department store. But first, food. I hadn't eaten since dawn. I found a state-run restaurant and bought 2 pork and sauerkraut buns for 50 fen each. One bite, and my jaw nearly dropped. These things were more meat than sauerkraut, juicy, fatty pork bursting out with every chew. I inhaled both in seconds, then ran back and bought 10 more to bring home for the kids. I bought an iron bucket for 9 yuan and 6 meters of plastic sheeting for 20 fun, my solution for meat storage since the crock was full. I got the shop owner to give me 2 burlap sacks and a wooden board with a rope, loaded everything into the bucket, and pulled it home like a makeshift sled on the snow. At a small shop along the way, I picked up 41 fruit candies for the kids, 41 fun. That left me with 23 yuan 50. The trip back was faster than going. I alternated between walking and jogging, and the snow-covered road made pulling the loaded bucket surprisingly easy. An hour and 10 minutes from the county border, I was back in the village. As I passed through, I noticed people standing at the west end of the village staring toward the north road. A couple rushed past me talking about reserving carts. Apparently you now had to book 2 days in advance. That hit me like cold water. I needed a cart the day after tomorrow to pick up my brother's wheelchair from the carpenter. If I didn't reserve one now, it could be weeks. I dropped the bucket in the yard without even opening it. My sister-in-law came running out asking questions. What was in the sacks? Why the iron bucket? But I told her I'd explain later and took off running for team leader Lu's house. When I got to the west end of the street, something was wrong. The road was empty, but a crowd was packed around Lu's front gate. I figured I was too late for the cart, but then old Yang grabbed my arm and pulled me away. What are you doing here? Go home. He told me what had happened. The Chong brothers, Yushan, Yuming, and Yuqing, had gone up the mountain today. They didn't find any firewood, but Chong Yuming found wolves. He'd been mauled and was inside Lu's house right now getting patched up, bleeding everywhere. They really ran into wolves? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'd seen the tracks myself. Those mountains were crawling with them. Old Yang told me what happened. The Chong brothers, all 3 of them, had gone up the mountain and walked right into a wolf pack. Yuming got mauled badly, and if Yuqing hadn't sprinted back for help, all 3 of them might have died up there. They'd just brought Yuming back on a cart, bleeding through his bandages. I felt bad for them, but I still needed a cart. Not for firewood. I had enough of that. I needed to pick up my brother's wheelchair from the carpenter in Little Poplar Gulch the day after tomorrow. If I didn't reserve a cart now, it could be weeks. I pushed past the crowd into Lu's yard. When I asked about borrowing a cart, every head turned. Lu tried to talk me out of it. Then the neighbor women started in, by Shuzhen and Wang Baixiang, acting all concerned, but really hoping I'd go and get myself killed. Lu cursed them out, asking if they'd forgotten I'd just sold them meat at a fair price yesterday. I pulled Lu aside and told him quietly that I wasn't actually going up the mountain. I'd ordered a wheelchair for my brother from the carpenter near Little Poplar Gulch. No deep forest, no wolf territory. His face relaxed. He wrote the slip and handed it over. Outside, the gossip factory was already spinning up. People couldn't believe I'd borrowed another cart right after someone got mauled. Old Yang scolded me too until I explained I was just picking something up, not climbing the mountain. I told him I'd leave before dawn. Wolves don't wake up that early. He thought about it, laughed, and admitted I had a point. But the part one didn't hear until later chilled me to the bone. On the cart ride home, the Chong brothers were talking. Yushan was furious at his brothers for going behind his back. Then Yuching brought up the wolves, said they should find a way to kill them for revenge. Yushan snapped that they had nothing but knives, and what they really needed was a gun. Then he said something that made my stomach turn. He'd been trying to get old Yan's hunting rifle for 6 months. His plan was to marry Yuching off to old Yan's daughter Xiaohu, not because he cared about the girl, but to get his hands on the gun. Yuching said Xiaohu's father had already refused the matchmaker, and he barely knew the girl anyway. Yushan's answer was ice cold. If she won't agree, find a chance to force yourself on her. Then see if old Yin still says no. I got home and set up the iron bucket in the shed next to the big crock. Lined it with plastic sheeting, put the wolf legs on the bottom and the sheep legs on top, covered it with a clean board. Now we had room to freeze whatever I brought back next. My brother started scolding me the second he saw the bags. Said I was wasting money, should be saving for a wedding. My sister-in-law told him to be quiet. It was my money. I opened the first sack and started pulling things out one by one. 10 jean of corn flour. 10 jean of rice. 10 jean of white flour. My sister-in-law's eyes went wide. She hadn't told me we were almost out of grain, but I'd figured it out on my own. She asked how I'd bought it without ration tickets. I told her I'd found a ticket seller at the black market, which was true enough. She complained the rice and white flour were too expensive. I told her the kids needed proper nutrition. Then came salt, soy sauce, sugar. She groaned at the sugar price. I pulled out 10 meat buns I'd bought at the state restaurant. Told them the buns were practically all meat inside, and we'd heat them up for dinner. Then 41 fruit candies. Ying took the bag and handed 6 to Xiqing. The boy unwrapped one, ran straight to my brother, and put it in his mouth first. Then he gave one to my sister-in-law, one to me, and only then ate one himself. That kid was all right. I opened the second sack. New gloves, a pair with little fabric rabbits for Ying, plain cotton ones for Xiqing. Both kids lit up. Ying held hers like they were made of gold. Xiqing had never owned anything new that wasn't a hand-me-down. New school bags for both of them. 2 boxes of crayons for Ying. Then I pulled out 2 tins of Wanziqianhong skin cream and handed them to my sister-in-law. She tried to refuse, said she was too busy working to bother with things like that. I told her to use it at night. Her hands were cracked open from the cold and all the washing and chopping. My brother smiled and told her to just take it. He'd been trying to get her to see the doctor about her hands for months, but she always refused to spend the money. She took the tins, eyes shining, and was about to put them away when I stopped her. Wait, there's one more thing. I reached into the bag and pulled out a black plastic wrapping. Tore it open. Inside was a brand new red padded coat. My sister-in-law froze when she saw the red coat. She immediately refused, said it was too expensive, told me to return it, started reaching for the bag to pack it back up. I grabbed her arm and stopped her. I told her the truth. When I came to this family at 10 years old, they weren't rich, but she and my brother raised me alongside their own 2 kids without a single complaint. I never helped. I caused trouble. I wasted their money on drinking and gambling. Any other woman would have kicked me out years ago, but she never once said those words. In her eyes, I wasn't a brother-in-law, I was her child. And in my eyes, she wasn't just a sister-in-law. She was my mother. One coat was nothing compared to what she'd given me. If it wore out, I'd buy another. Money could always be earned back. She wiped her tears and tried to laugh it off. My brother was blinking hard, fighting back his own tears, until I ruined the moment by joking that he'd never even bought his wife new clothes. He glared at me, and the crying stopped. She washed her hands before touching it, didn't want to get it dirty. When she tried it on in front of the mirror, it fit perfectly. Ying told her she looked beautiful. My brother stared at her like he was seeing the woman he'd married all over again. She blushed and told him to stop. Then I pulled out the 2 school bags. Xiqing grabbed his and hugged it to his chest. No kid in the village had a real school bag. Everyone used old cloth sacks or tied their books with string. but Ying didn't take hers. She looked at the floor and said Siqing could have both. My heart clenched. I knew what this was about. In my past life, right around this time, Ying had deliberately failed every exam, scored 0 on every test, then told her parents she couldn't learn anymore. She quit school so the family would only have to pay for one child. The teacher came to the house to talk her out of it, but she stuck to her story. She'd sacrificed her own future so her little brother could keep his. I called her out. Told her a girl who'd gotten perfect scores her whole life doesn't suddenly score 0 by accident. She must have written every answer wrong on purpose. My brother and sister-in-law stared at her. They'd never questioned it. They'd been too overwhelmed by everything else to think it through. Ying kept her head down and didn't answer. I didn't push that point. Instead, I told her the family had money now, had food, had meat every day. I could afford to send both of them to school all the way through graduation. She'd go back after the new year with her new bag and her new crayons, and she was never allowed to score 0 again. If she did, I told her, Siqing would eat all the meat while she watched. Siqing raised both hands in agreement. Ying smacked his arm and challenged him. Whoever scored lower wouldn't get meat. He immediately backed down. She opened the bag and found 2 boxes of red tassel crayons inside. Her eyes went wide. She loved drawing. She'd sketch everything in the house with her pencil, and the pictures always looked real. My brother and sister-in-law used to say she'd grow up to be an artist. My sister-in-law looked confused. She didn't understand how I knew about the drawing. The old me had never paid any attention to Ying. What she didn't know was that in my past life, in the living room of the house where I died alone, there hung a painting called The Dream Home. Ying had painted it years after she'd grown up and become successful. It showed a warm little house with a family inside. My brother, my sister-in-law, Siqing, and herself. I wasn't in it. Ying held the crayons and couldn't speak. She'd wanted a set ever since she saw her classmates using them, but never dared ask. Tears rolled down her face. She thanked me, then handed everything, the bag, the gloves, the crayons, to my sister-in-law for safekeeping. Siqing did the same with his bag. My sister-in-law folded the red coat carefully and put it in the top shelf of the cabinet. I told her she should wear it, not store it. She said it was too nice for housework. She'd save it for going out. She noticed I hadn't bought a single thing for myself. I told her I didn't need anything. After I went to put the sacks away, my brother and sister-in-law talked privately. My brother wanted her to bring up Xiaohu, old Yan's daughter, as a match for me. She admitted she'd forgotten, then pointed out that 30 gene of grain wouldn't last 5 people a month. She'd go borrow more from neighbors if she had to, but she didn't want me to know. She said I hadn't rested in days, and she couldn't put more weight on me. My brother agreed. Then he told her she'd worked too hard for too many years. She turned away and smiled. 12 years of raising me, and now it was finally paying off. I couldn't sit still. I grabbed the axe and started splitting all the pine logs we'd hauled back. My sister-in-law came out and tried to make me stop, said I'd been walking all day. I kept swinging. The kids came out too, and the 4 of us worked until dark. We split every last log from both cartloads and stacked them in the yard, a wall of firewood taller than a person, enough to burn all winter without thinking twice. That evening, Siqing asked for lamb ribs. My sister-in-law scolded him, but I pulled the rack right out of the crock and handed it to him. She shook her head and said I spoiled the kids. While she cooked, I noticed the fish scale jelly she'd made from all those scales we'd saved. That got me thinking about fishing again. Tomorrow I had no cart. Both were booked, so I couldn't pick up the wheelchair yet, but I could go to the river. The problem was that scooping with a hand net was slow and exhausting. What I really needed was a proper fishing net. Drop it in at night, pull it out in the morning. Way more fish, way less freezing. My brother called me into the bedroom. He had the feather duster in his hand, which made me nervous. He told me to sit down. I eyed the duster and said I'd rather stand. My sister-in-law grabbed it away from him. He started talking about how it was time I settled down and that there was someone right here in the village, that Yin girl. The front door opened. Auntie Fong, my sister-in-law jumped. Standing in the doorway was Yin Xiaohu herself. My sister-in-law practically shouted Xiaohu's name so my brother would hear and shut up about the matchmaking talk. He clamped his mouth shut just in time. Xiaohu came in looking worried. Her father had caught a cold 2 days ago, went out without bundling up properly, got sweaty, then caught a chill. He'd been running a fever ever since. Dr. Shun had checked him and said it wasn't serious, but he wasn't getting better. She wanted to buy some lamb to help him recover, and she'd snuck out without telling him because he'd refused to let her spend money on meat. She stood there clutching a handful of small bills, ones and tens of fun, and asked if we had any left from yesterday's sale. My brother and sister-in-law both looked at me. The meat was mine to decide about, but when they turned to check my reaction, they found me standing by the cabinet grinning like an idiot. See, the moment Xiaohu said her father was sick, my brain went straight to one thing: the hunting rifle. I'd been racking my brain for days trying to figure out how to get old Yin to lend it to me. Now he was lying in bed with a fever. If I showed up with good food and genuine concern, that changed everything. My sister-in-law elbowed me before Xiaohu could notice my ridiculous smile. I snapped out of it, ran to the shed, and pulled out the best piece we had, a whole rear leg of roe deer. When I brought it back, Xiaohu's eyes went wide. She said she only had a yuan or two and couldn't afford that much. I told her to put her money away. Her father had helped our family plenty since my brother got sick. This was the least we could do. She kept refusing. My sister-in-law took the leg from me and shoved it into Xiaohu's hands. Still she wouldn't take it. Said if she'd known they'd refuse payment, she never would have come. Then my brother played his card. It's dark out. Xiaowen, walk her home and carry the meat for her. I blinked. I'd been planning to visit Old Yin tomorrow about the gun. But tonight worked too. My sister-in-law caught my instant agreement and nearly burst out laughing. She told me to bring a knife in case of wolves. Xiaohu protested, said she didn't need an escort, but my sister-in-law reminded her wolves had been spotted in the village recently. That shut her up fast. After we left, my brother and sister-in-law had their moment of celebration. My sister-in-law told him he was blind. Couldn't he see I'd obviously already taken a liking to the girl? Why else would I give away our best cut of meat for free and jump at the chance to walk her home? My brother slapped his forehead. You're right. My sister-in-law said if things went well, they might be planning a wedding by spring. My brother exhaled and said once I was married and settled, he could finally be at peace. Her smile froze when she heard that. She knew exactly what at peace meant. She went back to the kitchen and stood by the stove, staring at the lamb ribs in the pot, wondering whether even getting me married would be enough to keep her husband from giving up on life. I walked Xiaohu home, keeping a proper distance, 1 meter apart, her in front, me behind. People talk in small villages. She asked me if hunting in the mountains was hard. I could tell what she was really thinking. I told her the mountain was full of wolves and left it at that. She went quiet. Then, as we turned onto her street, a dark figure came sprinting from the crossroads straight at Xiaohu. She went white and stumbled backward. I gripped the chopping knife and shouted. The figure saw me and bolted west into the darkness. Xiaohu was clutching the back of my coat, shaking. By the time she let go and apologized, whoever it was had disappeared. I told her it wasn't just wolves she had to worry about at night. There were men who prowled around after dark too, the kind that wouldn't be dealt with until the nationwide crackdown started in a couple years. Thank God my brother had insisted I walk her home. When we got inside, Old Yin was lying on the heated bed, feverish and irritated that Xiaohu had snuck out. She told him she'd gone to buy meat and that my family had sent me to walk her back. She left out the part about the stranger on the road. I set the deer leg on the table. Old Yin tried to refuse, told Xiaohu he'd pay me back after the new year. I told him the meat was free, a gift for an old friend of my brother's. Then I smiled and said I also had something to ask him. His face went hard immediately. He already knew. You want the gun again? I didn't deny it. He refused flat out, same as before. Said hunting had crippled him and he didn't want the same for me. I noticed something though. He was clutching the rifle right there on the bed, sleeping with it. That wasn't normal, even for him. Then I put it together. On our walk, Xiaohu had asked about hunting. She was thinking about going up the mountain herself to earn money for her father's medicine. Old Yin knew it too. That's why he wouldn't let the gun out of arm's reach, even while sleeping. He was terrified she'd take it and go. That was exactly how she'd died in my past life. Took the gun, went up alone, didn't know the first thing about the woods. The wolves got her before the search party could. So I changed my approach. I told him to think about this carefully. Right now it was just a cold. But what if someday it was something worse? He might be willing to just lie down and accept it, but Xiaohu wouldn't. She'd grab that gun behind his back and head into those mountains alone. A girl who'd never hunted, never been in the forest, with a pack of wolves waiting. He stared at me and couldn't answer. I'd hit the nerve exactly right. I pressed on. Lend me the gun. I couldn't promise I'd bring something back every time, but when I did, his family would get a share, meat and money both. Right now that rifle was just sitting there useless. He couldn't hunt with a broken leg. He couldn't earn from it. He couldn't feed his daughter with it. All it did was sit in his hands while Xiaohu went hungry and dreamed about doing the one thing that would get her killed. Old Yin sat there stroking the rifle, wrestling with himself. I could see he was tempted but couldn't let go. It was his grandfather's gun. He refused again, saying he could keep Xiaohu from taking it. I almost laughed. You told her not to buy meat tonight, and she still snuck out. You really think you can watch her every second? He had no answer for that. Then he tried another excuse, said if something happened to me, he couldn't face my brother and sister-in-law. I told him I was going up that mountain regardless. I'd already reserved the cart. I'd already gone twice without a gun. Yesterday, I'd barely survived a wolf because it happened to have a broken leg. With a rifle, I'd actually be safer. So lending me the gun wasn't putting me in danger. It was keeping me alive. He let out a long breath. I could see him weakening. I hit him with the last point. His family needed money. His leg meant he could barely work. Xiaohu's wages were tiny. Medicine for his leg ate up whatever they saved. That gun was worth nothing sitting on his bed. In my hands, it could feed both our families. He went silent for a long time, rubbing the barrel. Then he gritted his teeth and shoved it toward me. Take it. But you'd better bring me a share of whatever you kill. Otherwise, I'm going to your brother's house to collect. I grabbed it with both hands and nearly fell off the bed when I realized what I was holding. A Type 56 semi-automatic rifle. The exact same gun I'd used as a ranger in my past life. Accurate to 300 meters, enough stopping power to drop a wild boar in one shot. There wasn't a better hunting weapon in the whole country. Old Yin claimed his grandfather had used it to fight the Japanese. I had to bite my tongue. The gun was manufactured in 1956, decades after the war. But I wasn't about to argue history with the man who'd just handed me exactly what I needed. Xiaohu brought out gun oil and half a box of ammunition, 32 rounds total. Not a lot, but enough to get started. Old Yin reminded me that having a gun didn't make me invincible. Some things in those mountains, a gun couldn't help with. Before I left, I asked about a fishing net. I had no cart tomorrow, so I was planning to spend the day at the river. Old Yin had one from his fishing days with my brother. He told Xiaohu to dig it out and hand it over. She walked me to the gate. In a quiet voice, she thanked me again for what happened on the road and asked me not to tell her father. I told her I had no reason to. Walking home with a rifle on my shoulder, a knife in one hand, and a fishing net on the other, I started planning. Tonight, I'd eat dinner, then head to the East River and set the net under the ice hole. Fish were oxygen-starved in winter. They'd crowd toward any opening. By morning, the net would be full. I'd pull it up early and haul the catch straight to the black market in town while the fish were still fresh. Fresh fish sold faster and for more money. Tomorrow was going to be a busy day. But then again, every day since I'd come back had been busy, and I wouldn't have it any other way. After I left, Old Yin scolded Xiaohu for sneaking out to buy meat. She felt guilty about the whole thing. But then Old Yin said something that caught my attention later. He'd lent me the gun partly to keep it away from the Chong brothers. Apparently Chong Yushan's wife had come to propose a marriage between Xiaohu and the youngest brother, Yuqing. Old Yin had refused flat out, knowing they only wanted the rifle. He called them dogs, every last one. He warned Xiaohu to be extra careful, especially at night. Said Yuqing might try something now that the wolves had mauled his brother and they were desperate for a gun. He told her to lock the gate every evening and not step outside after dark. Xiaohu froze when she heard that. She was probably thinking about the shadow that had rushed at her on the road, wondering if it had been Yuqing. She stood by the stove with the meat boiling, her face hot, but she told herself it was just the steam. Back home, I walked in carrying the rifle, and my sister-in-law's face dropped. She asked why I'd brought a gun home. I told her Old Yin had lent it to me, nearly said, tricked him into it, but caught myself just in time. She wanted to argue, but when I pointed out it was safer than going up the mountain with just a chopping knife, she bit her tongue. She knew I was going again the day after tomorrow no matter what. My brother called me into his room. He was furious, but not about the gun. What about Xiaohu? He asked. I walked her home. What about her? He looked like he wanted to strangle me. After I left the room, my sister-in-law sat next to him and they whispered back and forth. He was fuming. We sent him to court a girl, and he came back with a gun. She told him to calm down. Maybe I just hadn't thought about it that way. He said there was nothing to think about. I was just an idiot. We ate dinner, lamb ribs, and the meat buns I'd brought from town. Then I told them I was heading out again to set the fishing net in the river. My sister-in-law tried to stop me. Said it was dark, said we had plenty of fish already. I explained this wasn't for eating. I was going to pull the net up at dawn and take the catch to the county market to sell. Fresh fish at the black market would fetch good money. She stared at me. You're going to sell fish in the county? My sister-in-law and brother both tried to talk me out of selling fish at the county market. My brother said there was nowhere to sell fish up there. I told them the black market was full of buyers, and if I went early with fresh fish, not frozen like what the shops sold, people would line up for it. My sister-in-law worried about getting caught. I told her I'd be done and gone before anyone came to check. My brother wanted her to go with me. I said no. He asked how I'd carry everything. I told him I'd make a simple sled out of branches and wire. Nothing fancy, just enough to drag across the snow. Over dinner, my sister-in-law tried the meat buns. She bit in, saw all the pork inside, and asked how much they cost. I made the mistake of telling her, 5 mao each. The whole table went silent. My brother wouldn't take another bite. The kids stopped after 2. My sister-in-law sat there holding hers, looking pained. 10 buns meant 5 yuan. That could buy 50 jin of corn flour. I tried to recover by telling them the pelts had sold for over 60 yuan. Wolf skin alone was 30. That was more than yesterday's meat sale. But the damage was done. 3 buns sat untouched. I kicked myself for opening my mouth. Should have just said they were cheap. After dinner, my sister-in-law insisted on coming to help me set the net. I gave in. She was right that more hands meant faster work. Ying came too, carrying the oil lamp. I brought the rifle loaded with 10 rounds, safety on. We walked east through the quiet village. Ying got nervous when dogs started barking to the southwest. My sister-in-law tensed up. Last time wolves came into the village, the dogs had barked from that same direction. I told them to relax. We had a gun. If a wolf showed up, we'd eat it for breakfast. What none of us knew was that the barking wasn't about wolves at all. At that same moment, on the southwest edge of the village, a figure was running through the dark toward Chang Yushan's house. It was Yuqing, the youngest Chang brother. He knocked on the door. Yushan let him in. Did it work? Yushan asked. No. Fong'an ruined it. The shadow on the road that had rushed at Xiaohu earlier tonight. That had been Yuqing, trying to do exactly what his brother had told him to do. And I'd scared him off without even knowing who he was. Meanwhile, the Chang brothers were plotting in the dark. Yuqing had been the one who'd rushed at Xiaohu on the road. He'd been stalking her all afternoon, waiting by her street corner, and when she finally left the house alone, he'd gone after her. I'd shown up and ruined everything. Yushan was furious. Not at me specifically, but at everything. He blamed me for his brother Yumming getting mauled, saying if I hadn't hauled back all that firewood, they never would have borrowed a cart and gone up the mountain. He told Yuqing to keep watching Xiaohu and wait for another chance. As for me, he figured the mountain would take care of things. I was going up again the day after tomorrow, and he was betting I wouldn't come back alive this time. I didn't know any of that. I was at the East River with my sister-in-law and Ying, setting up the fishing net. The ice hole I'd covered with snow last time had worked perfectly. Only 2 centimeters of ice had formed on top. A couple of whacks with the pickaxe, and it was open again. I widened the hole to about 1.5 meters across. Old Yen's net turned out to be a gill net, the sticky kind that traps fish when they swim into it. Single layer, 3 fingers wide between the mesh, about 3.5 meters long. A bit worn with some broken strings, but good enough. I tied 3 ropes to the net, 1 on each end and 1 in the middle, and fastened them to trees on both banks so the net hung at an angle underwater. That way it would catch more fish as they swam toward the oxygen-rich opening. Then I kicked snow over the edges, and we headed home. Back in the yard, I built a simple sled out of 5 branches and some wire. 2 curved pieces on the bottom as runners, 3 straight ones across the top, all lashed together with iron wire. My sister-in-law said it looked like a flat board and wouldn't save much effort. I told her the roads were covered in snow. Pulling a board across snow was practically effortless. I'd done it coming back from the county that afternoon with the iron bucket. It wasn't pretty, but it would work. I'd build a proper one with real lumber when I had time. Everyone went to bed. Ying pinched Siqing a few times in the dark for not finishing the dishes. My brother kept trying to convince my sister-in-law to go with me to the market tomorrow, but she couldn't. She had to massage his back every day and couldn't skip. She told him I'd be fine, that I'd managed every trip so far. But lying in the dark, she was worried sick about one thing: the black market. Selling fish she could handle. Getting arrested she could not. I woke up at 3 in the morning. My sister-in-law and Inging were already up. She'd guessed I'd need to leave early and had the stove going with yesterday's buns and flatbread warming in the pot. She insisted on coming to the river with me. I gave up arguing, and we headed out in the dark with the oil lamp, pickaxe, and bamboo basket. The ice hole had frozen over, but only about 2 centimeters thick thanks to the snow trick. A few swings of the pickaxe, and it was open. We untied the ropes from the trees on both banks and pulled the gill net out together. Fish started falling off the net as soon as it hit the air. Old Yen's net was too old to hold them properly out of water. I grabbed the basket and started scooping up fish that were flopping toward the hole, trying to escape back in. My sister-in-law ran over to help. By the time we got the whole net into the basket, it was nearly overflowing. My sister-in-law could barely contain her smile. She'd carried grain baskets for the production team before and knew this one held about 100 gene. Even with the net taking up space, there had to be 50 or 60 gene of fish in there. I hoisted it onto my back. She tried to get me to let her help carry, but I told her it wasn't heavy and walked ahead. She followed behind, quietly lifting the bottom of the basket to take some weight off my shoulders. Back home, I dumped the fish in the yard and started pulling them off the net. Inging came out to help, but accidentally tore a small hole in the mesh. She looked like she was about to cry. My sister-in-law started to scold her, but I stopped it. The net was already worn out. One more hole didn't matter. I told her I'd buy Old Yen a new one after selling the fish. I picked out 3 big carp, one for the family to eat at lunch, 2 for my sister-in-law to bring to Old Yen's house. My brother had wanted her to visit, and she'd been wondering what to bring. Fish solved that perfectly, and it was also a proper thank you for borrowing the net. For breakfast I had flatbread, pickled mustard, and a couple of lamb ribs. I reminded everyone to eat the buns before they went bad. Then I loaded the rest of the fish onto my little sled and headed north toward the county town in the dark. My sister-in-law stood at the gate watching until I turned the corner onto the east road. She was worried, not about whether the fish would sell, but about the black market. Getting caught there meant real trouble. My brother woke up an hour later and immediately started fretting too. He asked if I'd left already, then muttered about me getting arrested. My sister-in-law told him to stop overthinking. But this time, my brother's worry wasn't unfounded. He'd nearly guessed exactly right. I pulled the sled through the dark and reached the black market on Construction Road before sunrise. The place was packed, way more vendors than I expected. Every spot along the 800-meter street was taken, even the side alleys. I couldn't find anywhere to set up. Then an old man selling potatoes called me over. He'd just sold out and offered me his spot. I gave him 2 big white fish as thanks. He looked surprised they were fresh, not frozen. Before leaving, he leaned in and warned me quietly. The enforcement patrol would be coming through soon. Keep my eyes open. I set out my basket and barely got the scale ready before people crowded around. 1 yuan per gene, I called out. A couple of women complained it was too expensive. I told them the state stores sold frozen fish for 80 fun, if you could even get any, and mine were caught just hours ago. A man behind them shoved forward and said he'd take a big carp. Almost 2 gene, 1 yuan 90. He paid and left happy. After that first sale, buyers kept coming. Carp, white fish, grass fish, Christian carp. I weighed each one, showed them the scale, and handed it over. Business was moving fast. Then some young punk tried to shove his hands into my basket to pick his own fish. I tapped his hand away with the scale rod. He started screaming that I'd hit him, that I wouldn't let customers choose their own fish. He stood there yelling, trying to scare away my customers. It backfired completely. The crowd he attracted took one look at my basket, saw the fish were fresh, still unfrozen, and started fighting to buy. A big guy pushed to the front and ordered a white fish and 10 Christian carp. The women behind him wanted some too. Within minutes, the punk's audience had turned into my biggest rush of customers. He slunk away with a black face. Half an hour. That's all it took. Every last fish was gone. An old grandmother showed up just as I was packing and was crushed she'd missed out. She asked me to save her a big one next time. I told her I'd be back in 2 days. I loaded the empty basket onto the sled and started heading north to leave the market. I wanted to buy a new fishing net and find Zhang the cripple for more grain tickets before he got arrested. I'd taken maybe 2 steps when I heard a commotion from the south end of the street. Vendors around me started frantically packing up their goods. I looked south and my heart dropped. 2 men wearing armbands were walking up the street toward us. The enforcement patrol had arrived. The enforcement officers grabbed the couple selling frozen fish at the south end of the market, and the guy was that same punk who'd been causing trouble at my stall earlier. Karma works fast. I didn't stick around to watch. I spotted a side alley behind me and pulled the sled straight into it. 2 more officers appeared from the north end and grabbed vendors who were still packing up. If my fish hadn't sold out so quickly, I'd have been caught right there. Hiding in the alley, I bumped into Zhang, the cripple, running from the same direction. I called his name, and the poor guy dropped to his knees with his arms over his head, thinking he was getting arrested. When he saw it was me, he laughed with relief. I bought another 20 Jin worth of grain tickets from him. Rice and flour, 2 yuan total. He didn't have bicycle tickets, but said he could get one for 50 yuan. That was way too much on top of the 170 for the bike itself. I passed. He told me today's early raid was unusual. Someone in charge had gotten complaints about the growing crowd and called in the patrol early. Normally they didn't show up for another hour. He figured they'd come early again tomorrow and the day after, then go back to their lazy schedule once things calmed down. I told him to be more careful. He looked genuinely confused and asked if he really looked like a ticket seller. I didn't answer that. At the department store, I bought 10 Jin each of rice and flour, 3 yuan 20 with the tickets. Then I went hunting for fishing nets. The old man who'd sold me the iron bucket pointed me toward the supply cooperative east of the building. Before leaving, I spotted a roll of thin iron wire and some nails at his stand. I bought a Jin of wire and half a Jin each of 2 sizes of nails, 60 in total. I needed these to build a proper sled tomorrow when I picked up the wheelchair. I was heading for the back door when I stopped and turned around. I walked to the clothing section and looked at a black padded coat hanging on the wall. 8 yuan. My brother hadn't bought himself new clothes in 4 or 5 years. He'd patched the same coat over and over while spending every fun on the family. Tomorrow I was bringing home his wheelchair. He'd finally be able to sit up and go outside for the first time since he'd been paralyzed. He deserved to do it in something new. I paid and had it wrapped up. Then I headed to the supply cooperative for fishing nets. I bought 5 towels and 3 cleaning rags for 5 yuan 30. My brother and sister-in-law had been sharing the same worn-out towel for who knows how long. The kids' towels weren't much better. My sister-in-law never replaced anything until it fell apart. I wiped out the bamboo basket, loaded everything in, and went to the supply cooperative east of the department store. I bought 3 gill nets for 9 yuan, 1 with 4-finger mesh and 2 with 3-finger mesh. One of the smaller ones was to replace old Yan's net that I'd damaged. Everything packed up, I headed home. It wasn't even 9 o'clock. I'd be back before lunch. While I was gone, my sister-in-law had finished massaging my brother's back and gone to visit old Yan with the 2 carp I'd set aside. He was already on his feet, leaning on his crutch. The cold wasn't as bad as Xiaohu had feared. He grumbled about her telling people he was sick and tried to send the fish back, but my sister-in-law said they were from me. A thank you for the fishing net. Old Yan mentioned I'd borrowed his rifle. My sister-in-law nearly laughed out loud. She suddenly realized my plan. If I brought old Yan a share of whatever I hunted, I'd have a reason to visit his house regularly. And every visit meant more time around Xiaohu. She didn't even have to play matchmaker. I was doing it myself without knowing it. Or maybe I did know. She couldn't tell. She tested the waters carefully, mentioned my job situation, watched Xiaohu's face for any sign of concern. Nothing. The girl didn't flinch. Old Yan didn't care either. He said earning money and taking care of family mattered more than any factory job. My sister-in-law walked home grinning. Then Dr. Shin showed up for my brother's second injection. While she was there, Siching blurted out that I'd gone to the county to sell fish. My sister-in-law smacked his backside the moment Shin left. She was worried. If old Yan heard I'd borrowed his net just to make money selling fish, it would look bad. And Shun had the biggest mouth in the village. Whatever she knew, the whole production team would know within the hour. Sure enough, before my sister-in-law even finished scolding Siching, team leader Lu walked through the door. I heard your Xiao and went to the county to sell fish. When did he leave? My sister-in-law's face went dark. Shin had barely been gone 20 minutes, and already the news had reached the far west end of the village. Team leader Lu rushed over after hearing from Dr. Shun that I'd gone to sell fish. He tried to act casual about it, told my sister-in-law that at worst I'd just pay a fine, that the county was full of alleys to hide in. But even he didn't believe his own words. My sister-in-law wasn't fooled either. She already knew the black market had enforcement patrols, and getting caught could mean serious time. She wanted to run to the East Road to look for me, but Lou stopped her. He said if I'd been arrested, the authorities would have called the production team by now. The system worked through the commune and the brigade. Any arrest would generate a phone call. No call meant I was probably fine. That calmed her down just enough to keep her at home. But she sat there staring at the gate, neck stretched out, watching for me. Meanwhile, Shun's big mouth had done its work. She'd bumped into people on her way home and mentioned the fish thing to every one of them. Within the time it takes to eat a meal, 80% of the village knew. Yuan's father threw down his cards at the shop and ran home, ordering her to go spy on my family and find out if selling fish actually worked. She refused. Her mother backed her up. But Yuan ended up walking toward my house anyway, standing at the corner fuming. She couldn't understand how I'd gone from a useless drunk to the village's biggest earner in less than a week. The Chong brothers heard too. Yushan laughed when he got the news. He said selling at the black market was a guaranteed arrest, investment speculation charges, minimum 1 year. He told Yuqing not to bother plotting anything against me. The law would take care of it. He was certain I wouldn't make it home today. My sister-in-law held out for an hour before she couldn't take it anymore. My brother told her to go check the East Road. Lou gave up trying to stop her and went along. When they reached the crossroads, they found half the village already lined up on both sides of the East Road, all staring north, waiting to see whether I'd come back free or in handcuffs. Then Ying spotted me, a figure in the distance, pulling a sled with a bamboo basket on it. My sister-in-law slapped her thigh with relief and started running toward me. The kids chased after her. I was confused when I saw them. I asked why they'd come all the way out here. She said she had nothing to do and thought she'd meet me halfway. Then Dr. Shin popped up out of nowhere, smiling, asking loudly if I'd sold all the fish. That's when I realized she was the one who'd told everyone. I turned around and saw the entire crossroads packed with villagers, every single one of them staring at me, waiting for my answer. I told Dr. Shin the fish had sold out, and the whole crossroads erupted. Some people were impressed, others refused to believe it. Wang Baixiang pointed at the scales sitting on top of my basket and said I probably hadn't sold a single one. The stuff underneath was probably all unsold fish. Yuan muttered agreement. They couldn't see that the basket was full of rice, flour, clothes, and fishing nets, not fish. Team leader Lu just smiled and walked home without saying a word. He knew me well enough. I was like my brother. I didn't lie. I spotted Zhao Shuang lurking at the back of the crowd. His black eye mostly healed. We locked eyes for a second. I didn't acknowledge him and kept walking. At home, I asked my sister-in-law how the whole village had found out. She glared at Xiqing. He'd told Dr. Shun, and Shun had done the rest. I told her not to worry about it. What was done was done. I unpacked everything. 20 jean of rice and flour, 5 towels, 3 rags, iron wire and nails for the sled, and a new gill net to replace old Yan's damaged one. My sister-in-law scolded me for buying expensive grain again. I told her it was for the kids' nutrition. She scolded me for buying towels, said the old ones still worked. I told her clean towels mattered. Then I pulled out the black plastic bag. She recognized the packaging from last time and froze. I opened it and held up a new black padded coat. For my brother's face went hard immediately. I don't go outside. What do I need new clothes for? Take it back. Stop wasting money. He turned his face to the wall and refused to look at me. But I'd expected this. I'd planned for it the whole walk home. You don't want it? Fine. I turned to my sister-in-law with a perfectly calm face. Help me hold the bag open so I can pack my things. I'll grab some burlap sacks from the shed. We're splitting the household this afternoon. My brother glared at me like he wanted to explode, but I kept going with the split household act. I started listing what I'd take, my bedding, some firewood, maybe a few other things. I said I'd go back to my hometown, then pretended to remember the old house had been sold. No problem, I'll figure something out. My sister-in-law grabbed my arm, panicking. My brother tried to act tough, saying he didn't care. But when I kept rambling about which items I'd pack, he finally cracked. Fine. Stop with the splitting nonsense. Stay where you are. I grinned and shoved the coat at him. Then try it on. My sister-in-law burst out laughing. She held the coat up against his body since he couldn't sit up. It fit perfectly. He was still grumbling. Said he couldn't wear it lying down, that I wasted money, that he didn't go outside anyway. I told him he'd wear it when he got better. My sister-in-law put it away in the cabinet and told him to stop complaining since I hadn't even bought anything for myself. At lunch, I told them the fish had sold for 43 yuan 60. Both of them went quiet. My sister-in-law did the math. That was more than most people in the village earned in an entire year. One night of fishing and a morning at the market. My brother immediately started worrying about the black market enforcement. I lied and said nobody came anywhere near me. Then he and my sister-in-law tried to talk me out of going to the mountain tomorrow. They'd just heard from Dr. Shun that Chong Yuming had his leg nearly torn off by wolves. Why would I still want to go up there? I told them I'd stay on the edges, not go deep, and I had a rifle now. My sister-in-law gave in first. She knew she couldn't stop me. She just asked me to be careful and not take stupid risks for a little extra meat. After lunch, I went to my room and took apart the Type 56 rifle piece by piece, cleaned every component with oil, and reassembled it. My hands moved on muscle memory from 20 years as a ranger. My sister-in-law came in and watched for a moment. She probably figured I'd learned it during militia training years ago. She tried one more time to convince me to stick with selling fish instead of going to the mountain. She started strong but couldn't finish her sentence. I could see what she was thinking. My brother was already paralyzed and couldn't work. If something happened to me too, the whole family was done. She could maybe hold things together alone, but one bad illness and 5 people would starve. Before I could answer her, we heard a crash outside. Something falling, people shouting. Ying ran in from the yard. Mom, Uncle Yu from next door got hurt. They're saying a wolf bit him. My sister-in-law's face went white. Yu Laosan got attacked by wolves too. My sister-in-law was staring out the window at the commotion next door when team leader Lu walked in. Turns out Yu Laosan, by Shujin's husband from the west yard, had gone up the mountain with another group today and gotten scratched by a wolf. Lu said it was nothing serious, just a cut on his shin. The guy was so slow that even running from a wolf, he couldn't get away fast enough. There'd been 6 or 7 people in the group, and they'd managed to scare the wolf off. Nobody else got hurt. But Yu Laosan was being carried in on a stretcher like he was dying, blood everywhere, and they'd already sent for Dr. Shun. Lu wasn't really there to talk about Yu Laosan, though. He'd come to stop my brother and sister-in-law from talking me out of going tomorrow. They started in immediately. 2 people mauled in 2 days. The mountain was too dangerous. I should stay home. Lu shut them both down. He pointed out that I'd gone twice and come back with full carts both times. I'd killed a wolf by myself. Everyone else who'd tried, the Chong brothers, Yuan's father's group, today's bunch, had either gotten lost, gotten bitten, or come back empty-handed. He said I obviously knew what I was doing, and they should stop worrying. When my brother kept protesting that the firewood was enough, Lu hit him where it hurt. Fine. When it runs out, you go get more yourself. Let's see how your legs handle that. My brother went quiet. Lu pulled me aside at the gate afterward. Quietly, he said he knew I was really going to pick up the wheelchair, and that was the only reason he was backing me. He told me if I wasn't back by 1 o'clock, he'd bring men to find me. He looked me dead in the eye and said my sister-in-law couldn't carry this family alone if something happened to me. After he left, I was about to take the new fishing net over to Old Yan's house when my sister-in-law tried to grab it from me, insisting she'd go instead and I should rest. We were still arguing about it when Ming came running over from next door. She'd been watching Dr. Shin treat Yu Laosan and wanted to talk to me privately. I brought her to my room but left the door open. Couldn't have rumors starting. She asked me about hunting. Not for herself. She wasn't brave enough for the mountain. She wanted to learn how to catch animals and sell meat, anything to earn money, so her mother would stop forcing her to study medicine. She said if she didn't find something else to do, she'd be stuck becoming a doctor. I smiled at that. In my past life, by the time I came back to the village with money, Ming had already become exactly that, the village doctor, just like her mother. Some things, it seemed, were hard to escape. Ming wanted me to teach her how to catch rabbits and sell meat. Anything to make money, so her mother would stop forcing her to study medicine. She said learning about fevers and tongue coatings and eye symptoms was driving her crazy. I told her she should listen to Dr. Shun, that being a doctor was actually a good career. I knew she'd end up becoming one anyway. In my past life, she'd taken over from her mother and run the village clinic for decades. Before we could talk much more, Shin showed up looking for her runaway daughter. Meng Meng deflated instantly and followed her out without another word. On the way home, Shin noticed something in Meng Meng's voice when she talked about me. Called me capable and hardworking, eyes shining a little. Shin smiled knowingly and said, Meng Meng's growing up. Meng Meng had no idea what her mother meant. My sister-in-law caught Lu outside and tried one more time to get reassurance about tomorrow. He told her straight, stop holding me back. I was the only person in the village who'd actually succeeded on that mountain. If they kept discouraging me and I stopped working, then what? He promised again that if I wasn't back by 1 o'clock, he'd come find me. That evening, I noticed we were almost out of flatbread, so I mixed up some white flour dough for steamed buns. Siqing's eyes went wide. They hadn't had real wheat buns in 2 years. But the dough needed a full day to rise in winter, so tomorrow at the earliest. I also cooked 4 bowls of white rice. My sister-in-law complained it was too much, too expensive. But when the kids tasted it, they inhaled 2 big bowls each and couldn't stop. Ying told her mother to try some. Even my brother was surprised. He hadn't seen white rice in this house in a long time. My sister-in-law grumbled about the cost, but couldn't hide her smile watching the kids eat like that. I told her I'd buy more the day after tomorrow. She told me to just get corn flour. I smiled and said nothing. When I went to town alone, I'd buy whatever I wanted. After dinner, both kids were so stuffed they had to walk laps in the yard again. My sister-in-law shooed me to bed. Tomorrow I had to get up early, take the cart to Little Poplar Gulch, and bring home the wheelchair I'd ordered for my brother. He still didn't know about it. Nobody did except the carpenter and team leader Lu. Tomorrow, for the first time since he'd been paralyzed, my brother was going to sit up and see the sky. I was up at 3 again. My sister-in-law had already heated leftover lamb and rice, with a side of pickled mustard waiting on the counter. I told her to stop getting up so early for me. She said she'd always been an early riser and that I'd taken over so much of the housework that cooking was practically all she had left. She was right. Since I'd come back, her workload had shrunk to almost nothing. But that was exactly the point. In my past life, she'd worked herself to death. I wasn't going to let that happen again. I made a mental note. If I stopped waking up this early, she'd stop too. At the stable, Old Yang had saved the number 65 mule for me, the same one from my first trip. He'd deliberately held it back from the other borrowers. He told me that mule had saved Yuan's father's group when they got lost, led them right out of the mountains. But Yuan's father hadn't even said thank you when he returned it. Old Yang was disgusted. The mule knew the North Road by heart and turned onto the Southern Fork on its own. But once we left familiar territory, it stopped and wouldn't go forward until I took the reins. Smart animal, it only went where it knew. 2 hours later, I reached the pine forest. I loaded some windfall timber onto the cart and started sawing fresh logs to fill it up. The wheelchair pickup at the carpenter's was the real reason for this trip, but I needed to make it look like another firewood run. Back in the village, people had already checked the stable and noticed the 65 mule was gone. By breakfast, the whole place was buzzing again. The gossip mill churned out the usual predictions. I'd get mauled like Chong Yumming. I'd never come back. That wolf I'd killed was probably someone else's doing anyway. Yuan's father was at the card table calling me names, saying there was no way I'd actually killed a wolf. Bai Shuzhen ran home to gloat to her injured husband, then went back out to spread the news with Wang Baixiang. Both of them were certain today was the day I wouldn't return. Dr. Shun came to give my brother his 3rd injection. His condition was improving fast. He could shift his body and push himself with his arms now, something he couldn't do even days ago. The penicillin was working. Then Shin dropped something unexpected. She looked at my sister-in-law and casually asked if I was seeing anyone since I'd broken up with Yuan. My sister-in-law said no. Shin smiled and mentioned she had a girl back in her hometown. Right age, no job, learning a trade. Would we be interested in an introduction? My sister-in-law kept her composure, but I could imagine the wheels turning in her head. She already had Xiaohu picked out for me. Now Shun was pushing her own candidate. And somewhere in the background, Meng Meng had been looking at me with shining eyes just yesterday. Things were getting complicated, and I didn't even know about any of it yet. I was up on a mountain, sawing pine trees, thinking about wheelchairs. Back at the house, Dr. Shun had just offered to set me up with some girl from her hometown. My sister-in-law played it cool, but was already scheming. She had Xiaohu picked out for me and wasn't about to let Shin's mystery candidate get in the way. My brother just wanted me to hurry up and marry anyone. None of them knew I was on a mountain thinking about wheelchairs and wolves, not women. I loaded half a cart of firewood at the pine forest, leaving room for the wheelchair I'd be picking up from the carpenter. Then I decided to check whether the roe deer had come back to their den. I followed the old tracks from the deer I'd caught days ago, pushing deeper into the woods. The mule walked right up to the same tree where I'd tied it last time. It remembered. Smart animal. I found the den, a deep pit covered by fallen trees, a natural shelter from wind and snow. There were deer tracks around it, narrow and pointed at the front, clearly roe deer. Based on the sizes, there'd been 3 animals. One was the medium-sized one now frozen in my shed. The other 2 hadn't been back. Their tracks had a fine layer of snow dust blown off the pine branches, meaning they were at least 3 days old. No luck. I headed back out. It was nearly 10. I decided to get the wheelchair first and hunt later. The carpenter's village was about 30 minutes away. I'd pick up the wheelchair, swing back past the southern fork of the North Road on my way home, and check that area where Chong Yumming and Yu Laosan had both been attacked by wolves. Where there were wolves, there was meat. I steered the mule south along the edge of the pine forest and found a shortcut toward Little Poplar Gulch. Halfway there, the mule stopped dead. It looked around at the trees and backed up 2 steps. Tired already, I jumped down to pull, but the mule shoved me backward with its head and dragged the cart toward a side path. I chased after it, yelling that it was heading for a ravine. Sure enough, it stopped at the edge of a 6-meter drop. I grabbed the rope and tried to turn it back the way we'd come. It wouldn't budge. It pulled the opposite direction, refusing to go back down that path. When we get home, I'm telling old Yang to starve you, I grumbled. So much for being smart. Then I glanced at the trail we'd been on. Under a yellow birch tree on the other side, a gray shape had appeared. Yellow eyes fixed on me and the mule. A wolf. Just one? What are you scared of? I muttered at the mule, pulling the rifle from its cloth wrapping and clicking off the safety. I raised the gun. But before I could aim, another shape emerged from behind a pine tree to my left. This one was bigger, significantly bigger than the first. Sorry, buddy. My mistake. The mule backed up and gave me a dirty look. I didn't have time to apologize. My finger was on the trigger, scanning the trees for more wolves. A howl came from the right side of the forest. At least one more hiding back there. The wolf in front of me launched first, straight at my throat. The bigger one on my left circled around to hit me from behind, a classic pincer attack. These animals were coordinating. I didn't panic. I'd dealt with this plenty of times as a ranger. When the front wolf lunged, I ducked and rolled sideways. The instant I stopped, I swung the rifle toward the one coming from my left rear and pulled the trigger on instinct. A bullet hole appeared in its forehead, and it dropped. The surviving wolf howled, some kind of signal. I raised the gun to finish it, but a third wolf burst from the trees on my right, smaller than the others with a rounder face and softer features. A female. That meant the one giving orders from the trees wasn't her. There was at least one more back there. I dodged the mother wolf and in the same motion spotted the first wolf changing targets. It was charging at the mule. Number 65 was trapped, the cart wedged against a pine tree. I tracked the wolf's path and fired. Clean headshot. It collapsed. The mother wolf turned to run. I raised the rifle. One shot through her skull, and she fell under a tree. Then I felt it. That same prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Something behind me. I spun around. Too late to aim properly. The biggest wolf yet was already in my face, jaws wide open, yellowed fangs 5 centimeters long, going straight for my throat. I threw myself backward, falling flat, and jammed the rifle barrel up under its jaw as I went down. The gun fired. The wolf's neck exploded, and it crashed on top of me, dead, blood pouring down my sleeve. I shoved the carcass off. Its back claws caught my coat pocket and ripped it wide open on the way down. I swore and smacked its head with the rifle butt. Then I stopped. Looking at the 4 dead wolves, I realized they were a family, 3 young ones on their first hunt and a parent who'd charged in after watching them die. I felt a small pang, but loaded them all onto the cart anyway. Meat was meat. On the hillside 200 meters away, I spotted one more, another female with a scar running from her forehead to her right eye. She looked at me, then disappeared. Too far to chase. For wolves was plenty. I drove the mule to Little Poplar Gulch and reached the carpenter's house by 11. The wheelchair was finished, wooden wheels, smooth armrests, adjustable backrest, exactly like my drawings. 3 days of work, for yuan 50. I paid, and we loaded it onto the cart on top of the firewood and wolf carcasses. The carpenter nearly fell over when he saw what was under the branches. Then he swallowed hard and asked if I'd sell any meat. He said their village had already finished slaughtering season and there was nowhere to buy any. My eyes lit up. You guys are short on meat around here. I almost laughed out loud when the carpenter asked if his village needed meat. Of course they did. Little Poplar Gulch was even closer to the mountains than our village, which meant wolves on the road made trips to the county nearly impossible. They could only go once a year around New Year's, traveling in groups, spending one night in town to avoid the dark roads. No wonder they couldn't buy fish or meat. I told him I couldn't sell the wolves right now since they weren't cleaned yet, but I'd come back soon, maybe with fish or deer meat. His eyes lit up. He said he tried to get someone to buy fish in the county and they couldn't even find any. Before I left, I spotted 2 handmade sleds in his yard, real ones with proper crossbars and mortise and tenon joints, way better than my wire and stick contraption. He sold me one for 50 fun since it was a month old. I loaded it onto the cart along with the wheelchair and the 4 dead wolves, covered everything with branches, and headed home. The mule seemed to understand I was in a hurry. It picked smooth paths, kept a steady pace, and didn't stumble once the whole way. I held the wheelchair with one hand to make sure nothing fell off. Back in the village, people had been watching the western road all morning. My sister-in-law had already made 2 trips to the north road. My brother kept checking the clock and getting more anxious. It was past noon and I still wasn't back. Team leader Lou was about to borrow a cart and come find me when I rolled in from the west end of the north road. He spotted the wheelchair right away and grinned. He hopped on the cart to help me carry it home, said I couldn't lift my brother into it alone. The neighbors rushed over to see what I'd brought back this time. But not everyone was happy. Chong Yushan was standing at his gate, face dark as a storm cloud. His brother Yuching whispered that I must have gotten lucky again. No wolves, another full load. Yushan's jaw tightened. He told Yuching to keep watching me, find out when I was going to the mountain again. Then he laid out his plan. Scatter raw meat along the trail I always took. The smell would draw wolves right into my path. He thinks he can't run into wolves? We'll make sure he does. My sister-in-law was running back toward the north road when she spotted me turning the corner with the cart. She stopped dead and stared at the wheelchair sitting on top of the firewood. At home, my brother saw it and immediately started complaining. Said his back couldn't handle sitting up, said I was wasting money again. Same old song. I didn't argue. I just started taking the wheelchair apart right in front of him. I removed both armrests, lifted the front panel into position, then released the backrest so it dropped flat. Armrest gone, back down, front panel up, the whole thing became a flat board, perfectly level with the edge of the bed. Everyone went silent. My sister-in-law's jaw dropped. She'd gone to the county months ago looking at wheelchairs, but every single one was the sit-up-only kind. She'd never seen one where the back could lay flat. I explained the design. The backrest was adjustable. My brother didn't have to sit straight up. He could raise it just a little, whatever felt comfortable. And since the flat board lined up exactly with the bed, he could slide himself onto it without anyone lifting his bad back. My sister-in-law laid old clothes on the wheelchair for padding, then helped my brother into the new coat I'd bought him and got his pants on while he inched sideways. By the time he reached the edge of the bed, he was drenched in sweat but grinning from ear to ear. Ying and team leader Lu held the wheelchair steady while my brother slowly, carefully slid himself onto it. It took a few minutes. Nobody rushed him. I lifted the backrest slowly, 10 degrees, 20, 30, watching his face for any sign of pain. He told me to keep going. I stopped around 60 degrees and propped it with a wooden beam. He looked around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. He'd been staring at the same ceiling for months. Now he could see the cabinet, the window, the kids, his wife's face from a normal angle. He kept turning his head left and right, taking it all in, sweat running down his cheeks, but smiling so wide his face was nothing but wrinkles. My sister-in-law turned away and wiped her eyes. Without this wheelchair, her husband might never have sat up again. Lou gave the chair a test push. Want to go outside for a spin? My brother's eyes lit up. Let's go.